Bless up for tuning in to Project Cheney. Magic happens when you question everything. Conspirituality becomes reality, weirdness is welcomed, and it's okay to change your mind. Big up yourself.
Hey, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Project Cheney. As always, I'm your host, Cheney, and I am super lucky to be joined today by the paranoid American himself, Thomas. We go over a whole bunch of stuff in this conversation. He's very logically minded. He doesn't get his emotions all involved with conspiracies like a lot of people do. It's really refreshing to hear somebody that's so well read, knows so much about history and the history of different religions and the history of different cultures and the history of different symbolisms, and then to still be so up to date on pop culture and even comic book nerd stuff. A lot of the people that I want to bring to you guys to introduce you to are just doing cool shit in the world in general, and Thomas is no different. He has this punk rock spirit that I fucking am in desperate need for, that I wish more people were doing. It's like we all keep waiting for somebody to tell us what rule book we should be playing by, or who we should be listening to, or who's our boss. And when we were all younger, we made our own magazines. We didn't wait for time or for people to put our information in there. We just made our own zines. We didn't wait for, the record industry to start playing our music. We made our own labels. And there's something about that spirit that is in desperate need to come back again. And he does this really cool shit where he makes these zines, and you can go over there and print them out yourself and, litter your town with them. Not really litter everyone, but you know what I mean by that word. Stick them in places. And there are things like MK Ultra. There are things like Monarch or Project Bluebeam. They might be huge conspiratorial ideas, but he really does put all the information and dates and people in it, and then puts it together in a really digestible comic book type way. And our attention spans are all broken, and unfortunately they do work in that comic book slide type viewing. And Thomas from Paranoid American does this better than anyone else I've seen. And from a comic book perspective, I can look at any one slide of his comic and the layers of shit you can see in it. It's not just the conversation in the front. It's not just the picture in the back, but it's every little detail of the things on the shelf and the time the clock's set to. And, it all really matters. And it's the detail of life that really intrigues me. And I think it intrigues Thomas too. And I think that's why this conversation is so interesting. So I really love this dude. I love everything Paranoid American is putting out, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do too. Hey, you guys, welcome to Project Cheney, and today I am lucky enough to have Paranoid American, Thomas, with me to talk about all things crazy, weird, esoteric, and wherever the conversation goes, really. I kind of love that you are a comic book nerd and a conspiracy nerd. So these are like two of my favorite things. And you also know tons about pop culture, and everybody's favorite book, Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Well, you know a lot of cool books. But anyways, welcome. And I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, likewise. I'm happy to see you back in the scene.
I am really happy to be back, and I don't know, see what kind of magic unfolds. And we were already having an awesome convo before it started, and I don't know why, but this seems to be like a perfect jump off point. First question, what is God to you?
Okay, we're gonna start with the softball questions, I guess. So this is going to be a little bit of a cheesy answer, just because it's based on a not the greatest song ever, but this is my go-to reference for when someone asks me. There's a song called "What Is God" by Sticky Fingers on the Life and Trials of Kirk Jones album, which again, it wasn't like the best album that he ever came out with. But it's this dialogue that this guy is having with God. He's like getting down, he's praying, and he doesn't know if there's a God out there. And he actually starts getting some answers, but the answers I took them right to heart. And he's basically telling him things like, yeah, there's a God, but it's a God that creates rules that humans cannot break. Like, so if you want to interpret that as physics, or the speed of light has a certain thing, or if you want to interpret that as archetypes that perpetuate themselves through tarot, or any way that you want to interpret that. But to me, in a most basic sense, God is that set of rules which you cannot break, whatever that means. So
like the box that holds you into reality, gravity, whatever, if gravity's real.
Maybe. I mean, so if those were all just constructs, those things might actually be keeping us limited to what we could actually be. But I would say that if there is some actual, let's for the sake of argument, said that the speed of light truly was a constant value, regardless of the dimension you're in, or time space properties, that the speed of light has a constant value, I would consider whatever set that value, or whatever enforces or makes that value static, is essentially the closest thing to a God that I guess we could understand.
I like this thought. I never really thought about it. And I mean, God is the rules that we live by. Like whatever set of, and I guess it could kind of, would it be different for each person, or you think universal rules like that?
I think it would have to be universal. I don't believe that there could be a personal God. I think that that's a great
no Depeche Mode
for people.
My
own
but personal Jesus.
But I mean, I think that, if you're asking me, in my opinion, I think that God would have to be some kind of universal thing that would objectively be the same no matter what the perspective was. I guess, two humans looking at one thing is hard enough to get two people to agree. So I don't mean that like everyone would have to interpret the same, but it would have to be the same thing. So that's about as specific as I'll even get on that.
Did you grow up religious?
Yeah, I grew up Roman Catholic in a fairly strict, Roman Italian Catholic family, and did the first communion. Was like a big deal. It was like a bigger deal than any birthday or any achievement that I think I had. Was, just because I got communion at some point, and I think that carried through until I was, I became enough of a little shit that my parents didn't want to bring me to church anymore. And I remember that as being one of the most liberating experiences of my life, was the day that I stopped having to go to church. So I was brought up very religious, but I feel like I never bought any of it. I really felt like it was kind of silly. And then as I went on, everyone kind of goes through like the rebellious phase, then you might come back to it and think maybe I missed something, and then it's like, nah, I probably didn't miss anything, and then it's like, oh wait, maybe there's something more to it. So I'd like to turn this around and on you a little bit too, because you kind of mentioned that you've been going through a little bit of a growth and spiritual awakenings in some ways recently. So where did you start, and where are you at now?
I started sitting in churches with adults left and right of me, and really looking at
voluntarily, or was it?
No, it was always like an adult made me go to a church, and we were sitting, and even in my smallest brain, I just remember looking at the adults thinking, I don't feel what they feel. Like, I want to believe how they believe. You know what? I can actually put it akin to like people wearing masks right now. Like, I want to feel this sense of safety and security from a father figure in the sky, but I just never felt it. I remember going through the rituals of it as a child. I also had a born again experience in my 20s where I really look back to that experience and felt spirit in me and felt community around me, but really just needed like a father figure type hug. So it really made me cry and bawl and kind of probably have a ego death. And so I took it as like, oh my gosh, I just felt Jesus or something. And gosh, I was a conspiracy theorist back then, but I was just like desperately looking for some kind of faith. And
did you rebel at all before your born again moment? Did you rebel?
Oh yeah, total atheist. I mean, and since the born again, like I stopped that. I like after that, I started looking into Buddhism, Hinduism. I don't know. I think out of all the religions, I actually tried on atheism the least amount. Like where it just was like, I felt like I was kind of in a religion that I was like fighting that nothing existed, but I still felt like I was trying to convert people to it. And it was like,
Yeah,
what am I
that's
doing?
one of the best. That's one of my favorite aspects of atheism is that if you're a hardcore atheist, if you consider yourself to be a hardcore atheist, someone telling you that atheism is a religion is like it's like fighting words. But it's a very frustrating aspect. But I think it's also because there's so much truth to it. Because with atheism specifically compared to agnosticism, when you're atheist, you're like, I know that, I know the answer, and the answer is zero, or it's a very absolute stance that gives no room for anything other than, oops, I was wrong, or yeah, I was totally right. But you're never going to come to that until I guess you're proven right, and if you were right, then you're not going to be able to prove it to anyone. It's kind of a funny catch 22. But at the same time, like the religious aspect of that is kind of the same, where every time you ultimately are trying to convince someone else of just pure atheism, you're really kind of convincing yourself in little ways, more than anything else.
And then the idea that if you're trying to convince somebody of pure atheism, are you doing it to save them, quote unquote, from what?
Uh, yeah, no, that's a good point. I think a lot of that is just like more of that self-justification where it's like, well, everyone's fallen for this for thousands of years. Every family member that I probably grew up with, like everyone has fallen for it. Either everyone's an idiot and I'm the smart person in the room, and everyone else are these plebs, or you're being really naive and there might actually be something to it. Or maybe it's just tradition and people don't want to let tradition go easily. There's a lot of different answers to it. But I think that the atheist approach is, it's kind of like the proto. It's like when you're a teenager and you believe in anarchy. It's almost the exact same thing with religion. It's just like, I'm going to wipe the slate clean. Everyone's been lying to me. I don't believe in any of it. And then you slowly kind of build your own beliefs up, I guess, as you go.
I I think doing even the somewhere over the last like 4 years, I think I became the more agnostic, but almost like I was having a conversation last night and I said, I feel like every single religion has a needle of truth buried in a haystack. And that's the job for my logic was digging through the haystack to find the needle of truth so I could take it and move on. And what is that? Omnism is where you believe there's a truth in all religions or something like that. One of my friends where I was like, I feel like there's a needle of truth in a haystack. And she said, it's like a needle of truth in shit. It's not a haystack. It's like a literal pile of shit that you have to dig through. But I actually am like, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's a couple of needles, maybe like a needle you're trying to find in a stack of needles, because I think there's so much truth in every religion. It's just written with specific names and specific timelines and specific dates and specific things that we have to put like a man or a woman or a story or an apple or, Pharaoh or, God.
Well, now you're getting into the specific recordings, which would almost be related to the culture's astrology and their sort of personal, folklore that would drive almost all of that. I think like another good example of kind of that crux of being atheist and being anarchist. A lot of it, I think, like if you try to think back when you were in that sort of mentality, you're processing everything through logic and you're trying to think like, what makes sense? How does that actually work? Why would that actually do this and that? And sometimes that logic, or for me at least, I was reading the Upanishads, I think, or the Bhagavad Gita, or one of the Indian religious texts, and there was just a single question that broke it all for me, and it, like, my brain melted a little bit, and I sort of like veered off of that path. And it was just, if you are the ultimate believer in logic, why is there something other than nothing? Because if you are the ultimate, what's the phrase of the scientific concept of, like, you always go with the simplest
The Occam's
explanation.
razor.
There you go, Occam's razor. Yeah. So I mean, so atheism in some ways is very much like an Occam's razor sort of approach to it. But if you were to take that and all the way to its root and extrapolate it to its extreme, why is there even, philosophy? Why does anything exist at all versus just complete emptiness and void in perpetuity? That question alone kind of like broke my brain a little bit, because it's like, well, yeah, obviously it would be much simpler if there was just the equation was just 0 = 0, and not this crazy entropy with explosions and big bangs and mutations and evolutions and multiple dimensions. And why would anything at all exist versus nothing at all, when nothing at all seems like the ultimate peace, equilibrium, final answer? So that kind of start. I mean, it's a very easy question to ask and say out loud, but at the time, I guess when I read that, it was like the perfect thing that I needed to kind of to read.
And it's so great. It's like one philosophy question. I remember in my young brain hating philosophy and thinking it was just so stupid. Like, if a tree falls in the forest, what? And the amount of that simple question that I have broke my own brain with just laying in bed at night. And then
The tree question?
yes. And then even where I thought I hit all angles of it by the time I, hit my early 30s, and then to just do Idiocalypse and just have so many guests that I can think of them specifically, and how their tree question changed my whole life. Like a way I never thought of it before, of like the way they've philosophized it in their own brain.
So what's your current philosophy? Like, what's your current answer to that question?
If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? Yes. And to me, it was like the perfect noise and the perfect amount of wind to make everything around it need the next thing to facilitate the big flow of it all. Like, that's how I think of it now. I'm like, it fell, it knocked a certain amount of moss off this one tree. It allowed just enough light in after it did that to have this squirrel nut that it planted become the next little sproutling. And
Yeah, I guess in that case, it wasn't like saying the tree fell is a oversimplification, because it's more like the tree performed its preordained, duty in the role of things.
And so a noise would be like, does a bird sing from that tree one day? And that's where Birch Driver really made me think of it all differently, where he was like, when the acorn first fell from the tree into the ground, it totally made a noise. When the tree pushed its way through the soil, it totally made a noise. When it became a tree, and wind hit its branches, it made noises. Like, he goes through the whole thing, and then when it fell, it also made a noise. So yes, like his whole breakdown of the whole life of the tree, it made noises throughout every second. But then, which I think, if you haven't been already, my Maria 777, her and Human Vibrations, which Human Vibrations just kind of breaks my fucking brain a little bit with the way she thinks. They're into the rendering idea, where if no one's thinking of the tree, it doesn't even exist.
Yeah,
And
it's like the Maya aspect, or it's almost like the what the bleep, where like the ship comes ashore, and if the Indians had never seen one before, then they still wouldn't see it until certain patterns emerge, and then all of a sudden it would come into being. I was trying, before we started talking, going through a bunch of old documentaries, because you threw that Mandela effect at me, and that kind of that did break my brain a little bit, because the first thing I thought of was like, oh, I hope that was real, and I hope that it wasn't just some alternate dimension
what
manifested.
Mandela effect?
So I mentioned that there was a totally different tangent here, but you were talking about Hollow Earth theory, and I mentioned that I had seen like a very long documentary hosted by Charlton Heston about Hollow Earth, and it just blew my mind, because when I saw it at the time, I made a note of like, I can't believe that someone as well known as Charlton Heston was like attaching his name and introducing essentially like Hollow Earth theories, and it was on like a fairly popular TV channel at the time. I just couldn't remember where it was from. And you mentioned like, oh, maybe it was a Mandela effect, and I was thinking like, oh man, maybe that documentary existed, but it doesn't exist in the reality that we're in now. It existed in the reality that I was in back when I saw it, and something happened, and like that reality, I got into a car crash and died or something, and now I'm living on in this separate one. But I was able to find it. But that's another kind of concept where not that I 100% believe Mandela effect. I think for the most part it's just false memories, and people kind of agree collectively, but that also is very much related to like reality is what everyone agrees reality is in some cases. And even if it's objectively false and we're all kind of lying to each other about it, like we all have to share this reality with each other, so that indeed is the reality. It's a weird way of kind of phrasing it, because I don't think it in like a metaphysical magical way. I think it in a very practical matter of fact, this is actually how things are operating sort of way. Yeah, a million tangents I can go on all of these.
What's the shape of the Earth to you? Simulation, space, hollow, flat, like
I think it's probably more of like a hair shaped spherical or peach shaped spherical, like asymmetrical sphere. I love the flat Earth theories and the hollow Earth theories and the Tartarian theories, but they are probably the hardest ones for me to buy into. I could buy into so many other seemingly outlandish theories before a lot of those, just because of my own personal hangups. But like one of the biggest ones for the flat Earth, for example, and the shape of the Earth, is I know for a fact that when you're doing calculations between two different points, and you're trying to figure out how far two different points are on the globe, you have to calculate the curvature of the Earth into that to figure out what the actual distance is. There's some constant that's been boiled down, but like there would be no other reason for that constant to exist to calculate that in, unless back when the first person started deciding how that everyone was going to calculate distances between places, they kind of like baked in this grand conspiracy of this curvature of the Earth number, and for whatever reason, that number still holds true to today. Things like that. I mean, it's one example of many, but there's just so many ways that like the math of the Earth has been baked into things that we do. I mean, my brain would literally explode if that were the case. If there was no curvature at all of the Earth, that's one of those things that very hard for me to, I mean, I'm an idiot. I'm a very naive person. I fall for things very easily too. So it's not like I'm the ultimate, litmus test for if I believe something that it must be true and vice
one of
versa.
the flat Earth things I always hear the flat Earth people go back to is, they're hiding God from you. But they believe in a firmament, and I don't understand I don't understand the difference of being trapped in a firmament or being trapped on a planet in my brain. Like, the idea is the same, like where you're not allowed to go. Isn't there's some kind of created boundary of like
It's a fun one to pick apart, because I've learned to pick questions apart at their base and just dismantle things. So I would first say they're hiding God. What God is it? A God that everyone that believes in this particular theory all also agrees on what God is too? Because I find that very hard to believe. Everyone agreeing that the Earth is flat. That's a very easy statement. It's either spherical or it's flat or it's a hologram or it doesn't exist at all and we're just kind of floating our brains in vats. But to then say, okay, fine, the Earth is flat and they're hiding God from us. I mean, again, like the God, is this a old man with a beard and a cloud God? Is it like a lives inside of the middle of the Earth, and his rage churning is what fuels all energy on the planet? Or I mean, those are questions I legitimately love to ask, not because I'm trying to dismantle an argument, because I like to pick it apart and figure out like where, like there's always a linchpin, right? There's always a certain point. Like if you told me you were a fundamental Christian and we went down that avenue, my number one would be like, okay, first let's determine, do you believe that snakes at any point in history could talk? And, and based on your answer on that, then I would know where to proceed next. Like, okay, well, are we going to talk about metaphors and astrology, or are we going to start talking about like literal reptilian hybrids and angels that interloped with humans? Both of those are equally interesting for me to talk about it at length. But it doesn't mean I give credit to either one of those more than the
Yeah,
other.
we can talk about every book, and it's like I feel the same way. The better I know any of the religious texts, it actually makes me more interested, or where I can also link them in history to the religious texts that maybe they came from, or that the people stole, and that's what everyone I realize, even on whoever the enemy is in our conspiracy world. I think a lot of the times it's like, the Catholic Church is evil. We must take down the Catholic Church. Israel's evil. We must take down Israel. The Jesuits. We must take down the Jesuits. And it's like whatever, the Muslims, Black Cube, and whatever. It's like always. It's like layers to the understandings of if there is this like ruling elite of people that are doing these rituals and things, they peel back so much further than any of these. Even like secret teachings of all ages, like when you go into like the Rosicrucian, Hermetic, Kabbalah, there's further back than that. So when people base their whole school of thought on Masonic principles, where did that come from? Where did those principles come from? Because in the grand scheme of what I'm realizing, and I'm such a noob to all this, that's not even the midway point when those religions come around. Those
and even if you go on the traditional proto cult, which would have been like cult of Mithra and maybe some slightly older Persian cults that didn't leave as many records, because even the original cults didn't have any sort of records. They're all based on kind of like not even secondhand, but like third, fourth, fifth hand reports of everything, especially on Mithras. So I always wonder too that is it just a matter of whoever wrote the first good book, like that ended up being the truth for everything going forward? And is that the only metric? Is the only metric if I can find an older reference to this thing, then it's inherently truer? That's a little bit scary to me, because it just means that the first person or organization that had control over what you could write and what could be published, they got to set the truth since day one, and there's almost no questioning in it. And honestly, this is another one of my favorite things to pick apart, especially in the conspiracy crowd, because there's definitely a overwhelming, I'm not going to say majority, but there's an overwhelming sector of conspiracy theorists that are all in, religious, and Jesus is the answer to essentially everything, and giving yourself over. And that one is the hardest one for me to process, because kind of like you were saying, well, if the Catholic Church is, in the papacy of old was essentially like a worldwide government for quite a while, like why give them all the trust and say, oh, they had the unadulterated book that they refined over and over and over? But that, I trust them on that, and they only kind of recently started doing a bunch of shitty things to kids. But like, look past all of that and go back and forget that they've got, tens of thousands of years of human record in their vaults that no one's ever going to see, probably ever. There's just so much of it where it's like, how can you believe so much of group A while protesting group B when they all use the exact same tactics?
To me, it's the Tower of Babel of it all. Like, don't your books all talk about how you're going to fight about the simple idea that you would fight about God, or that a Tower of Babel would exist, and that it just made all of your tongues not speak the same language anymore, is lunacy. If there was a God and your Tower of Babel existed in your book, then you would never be able to discuss God again without fighting. It wouldn't be a language. It would be actual ways you viewed him. Like, I just, it's interesting to me how much fear everybody has in other people's ideas or beliefs. Like, why does it fear me so much if you don't believe how I believe? It's almost like, why don't you get my Jesus vaccine? Like, well, if you're
Yeah,
this
with
vaccine
religion,
works,
there's an interesting dynamic of that where if you really do wholeheartedly believe in your religion, then people that don't are kind of working against you because it's like I'm not a religious expert, I'm not a theologian at all, so I'm probably going to say things that people are going to rightfully call me out and say this is totally wrong, but in a general sense, like what was the? It's a book
is
not called the.
theologian different than thelema? Is that the kind
Yeah,
of
no, theologian
Alistair
is
Crowley?
someone that essentially goes to college to be an expert in religious text and religious logic.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah,
And then so thelema,
Lightning is totally different. This is like an
okay,
Order of Golden Dawn, chaos, magic,
okay, okay,
and
okay.
I'm not an expert on any of those. Um, but I was sorry, I lost my train a little bit
I know
when.
I totally hit you off. You said thelema theologian. You're not a theologian.
Oh yeah. So I don't 100% know everything. I make a lot of shit up when I'm both on podcasts. So, but a big aspect of this I think was from the Kybalion or Kybalion or butchering the name of it. It was sort of like a dummy's guide or a Cliff's Notes to Kabbalah for an outsider looking in. And one of the things I took away from that, and this isn't specifically on Judaism, this is almost on all religions, but there's this concept that they were kind of drilling in that if you're like a hardcore Orthodox Jew in this context, then it's not just enough that you're doing what you can to prevent, since they don't believe in like a hell, but it's more of like again, I'm just going to making some of this up, but it's almost like a reincarnation aspect to where every time you do something that goes against God, you are guaranteeing that not all of you is going to return back to like the massive essence of God. And that's sort of like the end goal is to break away from entropy and everyone mixed up and flying around and in Dianetics it would be all of the thetans or whatever. Like once you purify all of those, or in the concept of reincarnation, right? Once you live a full life completely detached from ego and karma, then you can actually proceed to the next plane. You don't have to come back in the material world. It's a very similar concept to all of this, but there's a point of it where, okay, I'm doing my part, but if I see that guy doing something that I think is morally, reprehensible, he's actually going to prevent, me from advancing to the next plane because now I'm going to be up there waiting, in purgatory, waiting for this guy to get his act together. And only when everyone gets their act together and everyone's on the same page, where there'll be this, quote unquote, like heaven utopia where everything's all sort of like great. And I think that that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But I think that dynamic is present in almost every single religion where there's one aspect
Like
of
a
like,
group level up somewhere.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a group level. Like I'm doing my thing or like a group project, right? Like that's the other dynamic of it too. So if you believe in like the Roman Catholic aspect of, I'm a mafia boss and I've ordered, thousands of hits and I've raped and I've killed and everything, but in that last, 4 seconds before I die, I, pray and I ask for forgiveness and I, give all my sins and I do my 50 Hail Marys. Technically, I get to go into heaven as well, based on that sort of premise. And I think that that's a dual dynamic here of like it's unfair where I followed all of these strict, religious upbringing, and I was always morally upright, and I never kind of stepped out of line. And it's not fair that these other people can do these things and just be forgiven for it, or it's not fair that we both go to the same place after we die. So I think that aspect kind of adds a lot to that mentality of like has to be right and I have to kind of like go against you, and anything that's not what I think is technically evil because deep down that sort of is baked into a lot of these religions. Because everyone that's not following your religion is they've lost their way or they're not seeing clearly, or it's always some way of putting them beneath you. Like you're always going to be better or higher or somehow more woke or advanced or on a better path just because of something, because of the thoughts that go on inside of your brain, essentially.
I know, and just I think the forced. I have to just say because you're a Floridian as well, or at least in Florida, you're a Floridian,
Yeah.
right?
I've been here long enough to be a
Yeah, be a
native.
Floridian. It is full, like it looks like a tropical storm outside. So
Yeah, I mean, you saw the lights flicker, the power's going on and off here.
it's pretty insane. Um, I know it totally blew my, and I have all windows in the room I sit in, so I was like, oh my gosh. And I used to, I don't even want to say it. Everything's working so perfectly. I don't want to say
Yeah,
it
don't even
I
jinx
don't
it.
even want to say it aloud.
Don't put it into the universe, right?
I know. I know. I totally lost my train of thought. Stoner.
Well, I wanted to bring it back circle too because I wanted to start this off on like a bunch of bashing of religion or our beliefs because I've kind of come full circle in that whole why is there something rather than nothing that's kind of exploded into the point where logically I have to believe that there's a reason for it to still exist beyond just population control. That's not enough to make things last long. Like any good even a good disinformation campaign has to be based on really solid, real information, and then you just dress it up with a whole bunch of crap around it. But it won't even last without that real nugget in there. So personally, I'm really big into the whole like secret Bible code stuff where there's like math equations and like the parables about feeding people fish is actually showing you how to do advanced geometry that was passed down from ancient Persians and stuff. That's probably the closest that I feel like I convinced myself, and that's why there is so much consistency, and that's why there's so much reverence paid to these books and stuff. I don't think it's because the stories themselves are inherently great. They don't necessarily even teach great morals, even for their time. A lot of it's just I don't know, it's not, and that's not reading it from a lens of today versus when it was written, but just the fact like why certain stories made it to like the official book and the other ones the editors cut them out at certain points. All of these things, like it's a good way to standardize beliefs and culture, but at the same time like the information that's still in there, I think like there's legit scientific technological information buried somewhere in there. So that's I think that's fairly a fringe kind of approach to it, but
No, I kind of think it's like even if the powers that be, religiously, politically, whatever, and they're like, you're good at what you do, and they're like, hey, paranoid American, we need you to paint the Sistine Chapel and do this. I gotta think sometimes, not all the time, a lot of the people that were involved are in the same kooky, crazy cults, but sometimes there might have been somebody with like a good moral standing that was just trying to stay alive, but also really good at their art and was divinely touched in whatever glue order. For me, it's order versus chaos too. That's would be just, it's not even, so whatever divine order thing that you'd be like, okay, they told me to paint this, I'm going to hide this. They told me to write this, I'm going to hide this. So part of it, I think that there's people that have always goose-stepped in line. And then there's people that have goose-stepped, but at the same time been, passing secret spy codes.
Honestly, that hits home to me because I would argue that all of those people that painted in like subversive imagery or snuck messages in, like, that's the real artwork, and those are the real artists throughout all of time, and that they might even be more responsible for helping perpetuate religion as having the power, because a lot of those times when they bake those in, that contradiction just gives even more of like that mystical allure to everything. It's injecting with more magic essentially because you're adding like competing dynamics into this thing that's going to last the test of time.
The real art is the people that hide the shit in the shit. But I put it in exact quotes.
Well, you were mentioning like one of the examples, you hire Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel, and he paints some coded messages in, or one of many, many examples that you could have come up with. Another one that I like to go back to from Secret Teachings is the whole concept of a cult versus what's kind of presented on the surface. And the big one that Manly P. Hall goes into are the statues, where you would go into this church And for all, like, a mass majority of people, they remember, oh, there's the lady with the veil, and she's got the pomegranate. I'm just going to make things up. Got the pomegranate by her foot, and there's like a fox and a lion and stuff. And to the normal person, those are just like really easy visual kind of milestones to embed and relate. Okay, that's the lady that's the saint of whatever, and here's the guy that he's the saint of something else because he's got these like different visual aspects to him. But really, like when Manly P. Hall would go into and say a lot of the occult representations of these are like, well, that lion was actually a reference to an astrological sign, and the fact that the lion was on the left and there was, a deer on the right, well, that actually determines where they were within like these houses of the zodiac, and because of that, you can date exactly when their reigns were, and then maybe that pine cone on the foot or like the bull that he's stabbing, like these are all metaphors to more astrological signs in some cases, or if there's like a snake usually at the feet, a poisonous snake, these usually imply there was some kind of like forbidden knowledge that might have been included. If someone's got like an egg or a pine cone, that usually implies something. A really one of my favorite ones is, if you ever see the statues that kind of have like a shush, the finger in front of the lips thing, those are usually, according to Manly P. Hall and specific examples, those ones tend to say like, hey, look really closely at this statue because there are things that are being communicated that are only for people that know exactly what to look for and what they mean. And to the masses that come here and worship at the feet of these statues, they don't, great, you're worshiping a big rock, and the real person that comes in and knows what that statue represents, well, they're worshiping the math equations that it represents and the chemistry combinations that it's representing, and just all sorts of other things that can be baked into them. So that's kind of, this is a long-winded way where we kind of started out of our grapes on like essentially organized religion and then different religions and spirituality, and this is kind of where I've come back full circle, where I believe there is something rather than nothing. Don't think it's a big Santa Claus in the sky with a beard. But I do think that there's information here, and that information itself is God. And I don't know if it's like the typical example would be, God opened up the clouds and kind of looked down and talked to Moses directly at the top of the hill and, verbally communicate with them or telepathically. But really the God would just have been, oh, here are these patterns that we've discovered throughout nature and astrology, and just everywhere we look, we find these same numbers or concepts or things. And that kind of is like that language of God. I wish I was better at math because I could probably start like quoting all sorts of awesome algorithms and golden ratio examples, but that's sort of where my mind goes to it.
What's space to you if you're a person that believes in like kind of, I guess not globe earth theory, peach earth theory. If you're a person that believes in that, what is it to you? What are the planets and stars and moon?
I mean, I kind of believe the conventional on a lot of that.
Have you been to the moon?
So this is one of my favorite topics. So I think we have been to the moon, but I also think that there's a lot of aspects of how we got there, what actually happens when we get there, that's incorrect. And I also believe that at least all of the original Apollo moon footage was complete fabrication. That's actually one of my favorite topics to bring up, especially out of context, where you just say, I think the Apollo missions were completely faked, and people will typically assume that you think the moon. Yep, that was my turn for the internet to cut out.
I was like, was it mine that time?
I thought it was yours too, and then I saw that it had just completely cut out.
But it totally stopped on. You think all the NASA moon footage was fabricated too?
Yeah, pretty much. So I do believe that we've been to outer space. I believe that it's possible that we've been to the moon. Not 100% sold, mainly because I don't know why they would go to such great lengths to keep presenting it. But I do think that the original landing was totally faked.
what's your thoughts on NASA?
Never a straight answer is the best acronym I've ever heard for it. Is and I think that there's just so many, because when you're growing up, the common thing is like, oh, you're going to be a rocket scientist, and that's supposed to be like the pinnacle of sort of cerebral achievement. Is in the scientific world, at least here in the material world, is a fucking rocket scientist that can send people to outer space. But if you actually look through the track record of not the people that work at NASA, but that the things that NASA institutionally does and the people that run the institution aspects, not the scientists there. But the calls and the things that have happened there are so fucking shady. The fact that all of the original footage was just completely wiped out. I mean, I can't think of a better example of human achievement than a person flying into fucking outer space and landing on the moon and coming back, and live streaming the video of it and having a phone call with Richard Nixon while you're there, and just all of that. And then to say, oh, well, we recorded over the footage and we don't have a whole lot of information. There's inconsistencies between different astronauts that go out there. There's also a sort of like don't kill my heroes aspect of it when you do question things. I mean, I love watching Buzz Aldrin, knock people out for telling him that he hasn't been to the moon. It's probably one of my favorite video clips. But at the same time, it's one of those things where, man, you are really not allowed to kind of suggest that unless you want to be an ultimate pariah, whether it's being laughed out of a room or whether actually invoking like animosity from people just because they couldn't possibly believe that such a great lie could be perpetrated.
Do you think it's weird that no country's ever been back to the moon, or we're just not allowed to hear about it? Like, wouldn't some country just be like, we're going back in 2021, even if everything was fake footage?
But again, like, aside from it just being a grand gesture of look how fucking awesome, it's just like it's just whipping your dick out in the locker room kind of thing.
It gives me a Kim Jong-un, like, look how far we can shoot our missile in the sea.
Yeah, but what's I don't know, what has been the ultimate reason for going to the moon specifically? If any, I don't know. It's it's such an interesting concept because so many people I respect are absolutely fascinated with space travel, and I kind of am too, but it's also, I'm so detached from it. Like, I'm not even going to be able to experience 1/1000th of all of the things that I want to do here on Earth. And to then start considering all the things that you could possibly do in outer space, it's mind-blowing, but it's almost, it's too much. It's like a luxury of like, man, you must just have, an infinite amount of time and resources and focus to also be involved in that. I don't know. I guess in that way, I'm very attached to like the planet that we're kind of stuck on right now.
Do you get all into that? I almost am more fascinated. I don't know. I can't say more than Earth, but I love all the theories about the moon, like the hollow moon theory. I like the kind of arcana negative energy of it all theory. I think it's interesting that there's like old cultures on Earth that they talk about when the moon was first brought into existence. And out of all the crazy, bizarre things that I've heard about the moon, the most bizarre theory is the official science theory of how the moon got there, I think.
Go ahead and explain it.
So the official science is that once upon a time, a rogue planet came by and it collided with Earth and knocked a chunk of Earth off. And then on another orbit where this rogue planet came by, it hit that chunk into a perfect atmosphere so that it wasn't in the gravitational pull to be pulled back down to Earth, and it wasn't being pulled by the sun. So it would stay in this perfect orbit. And then I also just love the mathematics of the shape of the moon being like the perfect eye patch for the eye of the sun. It's like, it just, when the eclipse happens and this one's 90 million miles away and this one's, this far away, and this is how perfect it covers it with this light coming around it.
That's interesting because the whole idea of the moon coming from the earth, also it triggers this idea of like Eve coming from Adam's ribs sort of concept where like did someone not have an original idea at some point where even the scientists couldn't come up with their own story, or vice versa? Maybe that was, known, that was scientifically known at some point, because, make shit up, like the Atlanteans or the true ancient Egyptians had some sort of insight or had some kind of communication with some other entity that had the insight that kind of communicated that. Maybe over time it turned into, silly Bible stories about, ribs popping out and turning into other people. And but I mean, that kind of going back, that's sort of how I see a lot of these stories and archetypes. They can almost always, at least to me, be traced back to like a single origin or a single source.
And it's interesting, just maybe sometimes I look at Atlantis and think it was a very real place. And other times I'd look at Atlantis and think it was a philosophy. Like, what if this existed? The same as the tree in the forest. Like, what if this highest species on the planet kind of existed, and like, let's talk about what they could have done, or what they could have, like the same way we could daydream or do these.
Maybe I think a lot of the philosophical aspect is a complete cop out. It's almost like to me, this is a personal view to it, but like Atlantis was cool because they had crazy cool technology and had some sort of knowledge that went far beyond us. Or they didn't, and if they didn't, then it's uninteresting. It was just a story that someone made up, and it's no different than, say, James Cameron putting together Avatar. It might have just, maybe things like that kind of hold the test of time, only because there wasn't movies and other things to kind of like knock out of place yet. Like the spoken word and the written story was kind of the king of transmitting information between normal people forever until 100 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's like completely been uprooted. So a lot, I always go back to that on how much of this is popular and well known and kind of like assumed just because, like, well, that's how they've always done it. Jesus, cat.
I know. I was like, stop staring at me. I have like an old man dog, and he has a little bit of like Alzheimer's, and so he just forgets he's staring at me for no reason. Like, nope, you went out. Nope, you ate. Okay, go. I even the idea of the philosophy, or just like, here's this idea of Atlantis, or here's this.
But the tree one is a good example too. Like, to me, the tree either makes a sound or it doesn't. It's not as interesting for me to engage the aspect of like, well, if no one's there to hear it, did it really make? Like, yeah, it either matter fell and contacted other matter, and that caused the vibration, and that vibration is essentially what everyone would call sound. I mean, all sound is your eardrum, relaying a vibration from the external world into the inside of your head to then translate. So yeah, so if two things touched each other, almost like Birch said too, like, well, what doesn't make a sound? I mean, technically, on what scale you're at, if you're, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style tiny, you might be able to hear an ant walking across the dirt to make a noise. So likewise, if you're like a huge omnipotent being and a tree falls in a forest, does that make a noise? I mean, I don't know. Does a speck of dust falling onto the carpet make a noise? I mean, I guess, yeah. In an absolute sense, I love when you're saying Birch's answer is almost like, yeah, it all makes a noise.
I just love the blow your mind of it all, but I read all these old writings, look at all these old symbols, but there's also all these old maps. And I notice a lot of conspiracy theorists, or just alternative thinkers, they place a lot of credence sometimes in these old maps and maybe Hades was a real place, but they have maps of Hades, not to say that it wasn't, not to say Atlantis wasn't a real place, not to say, but a funny one that it's almost triggering for a lot of people, but it's just interesting to me how many people are in the school of thought of Tartaria. and they pull up maps and everything, but don't know the philosophy or like of Tartarus and like this level lower than Hades. Like it was actually something that existed, that they would talk about in these. Like it was, Hades would be where humans went if they were, in an easy way of evil, bad. Tartarus would be where gods went if they did wrong stuff and had to pay for an eternity. So,
but also when we talk about Tartaria and like the mud flood specifically, like that kind of aspect of it, that is almost correlated to the whole. Well, do you believe in talking snakes, or do you believe that that was a metaphor for something else? Because a snake literally speaking the same language as a person, and the person being able to hear it through whatever means. To me, it's like on par with a literal mud flood that would wipe things out and actually erase a huge aspect of history. I mean, I don't know the answer to those. Those are kind of like the two ones, especially when you bring up Tataria. Like I'm not sure where everyone stands on that. Like because it's not very clear to me.
yeah,
Like, is it a metaphorical, like a sinking of Atlantis? Did Atlantis
yes.
literally sink and bring all of their technology with them? In Tartaria, was the Earth literally, a circuit board, and all of these kind of patterns were not just for aesthetics and for honoring again like math and equations that might have been passed down, but they were literally like being used to harness energy and transmit energy and stuff. I find all of that interesting, but I don't really know what to think of any of it.
Yeah, it's all like, and certain like, is there hidden technologies? Fuck yeah, there is. Like, are they keeping things from us? Yes. Are we just fragmented, have just a fragment of maybe what humanity once was or what humanity is on its way to be? Yes. Like, there are aspects of all these crazy ideas of thought that I fully.
So here's a fun one. So let's assume that all that's correct. Let's say that there's technology that's been suppressed and that humanity could be so much more, but it's being held back. So do you think that there is a concerted like group of people that are specifically holding everyone back, or do you think it's more of that there's so much work and like the planets have to align perfectly for you even get access to that knowledge, and that it's like ineffable and that you can't just know it and then convey it to someone else,
I kind of like, I do think there's groups of people that are making concerted efforts to keep other people down, and groups of people that are, without us knowing it, that are going against other groups of people and maybe have been for whoever knows how long, that we're just in the way as much as.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like an elite version of Hatfield and McCoy's
yeah, maybe that's like like I do think there are things the Catholic Church, there's books that aren't allowed in the Bible, or that I think there's more books that probably weren't allowed in the Bible than are in the thing as the Bible.
This might be a fun topic, but another thing that I'm kind of torn on is when it comes to like the church, for example. So part of it I 100% believe and relate to, of the church suppressing information, not just because it would hurt their bottom line of getting people on board and committed lots of atrocities and yada yada yada, but there's also this aspect of like, are they trying to keep powerful knowledge away from people that are super smart and that could use it and turn it against them, or is there actually a very strong dynamic of, in mass, people are generally shitty to each other, and they kind of have to, the simpler your mind, the more easily it might work for you to just think like, oh well, I don't care about jail, but I definitely care about being tortured for a million years. So, or like
like you
the
would have morals of a child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the morals of a child. So like, and not to say that if you believe in religion, it's because of you have the morals of a child. I'm just thinking that from a purely functional point of view, religion might, as a whole, be a more beneficial thing. It might, maybe in the past they've tried to get rid of it, and they were just like, shit, man. When we leave people to their own devices without kind of like this step-by-step list to follow, like shit just goes completely out of control. So there might be something to this. We might actually need to give people this checklist of like, here's what you can and can't do. And of course, once you've established that, that has a power dynamic, so people are going to take care of that power dynamic. But I truly, truly wonder nonstop is, did that power dynamic start because, you know, a cabal got together and said we want the power, or was it because like we can't exist without something to like keep everyone in line to kind of agree on?
I'm of this mindset now, and I know this is triggering for people. I used to be one, if you would ask me this time last year, probably I was, full disclosure, everyone deserves to know everything. But I now believe there has to be a group of not just very intelligent people, very well thought out, very well felt out people that might need to keep things from the masses, like a group of almost protectors of knowledge. Or if humanity, like this whole quantum 4D, 5D witchy wizard idea that we're really powerful, everybody, I mean, really, no matter the community you pick, Democrats, Republicans, no matter how small you want to get in the conspiracy world, everybody's divide and conquer amongst themselves. If people could shoot power out of their hands tomorrow, how quickly would the world be abolished? So regardless of the structure, I am now seeing that not everybody is an arbiter of everybody's heart might be in the quote unquote right place, but sometimes their thought process isn't, sometimes their feelings get involved, sometimes power dynamics and ego and insecurities and all these real worldly things, that I do think there might need to be a group of people, like if there were a secret society, like that kept sometimes things at bay a little bit, because look what humanity does with just, I mean, we can't agree on anything that's true. So no matter, I heard an old vet friend of mine say once that I'll call him Vern, he'd be like, Cheney, if a comet hit this planet tomorrow and everybody was covered in the same colored dust, how long do you think it would be until they found something to fight about? They would be killing each other over eye color tomorrow.
Yeah, true.
And I kind of think, like, I don't want to think humanity and human nature as those things, but I can only base what I'm taking from this reality on action. And I just see how easily people are guided by fear, that if people knew the full reality, that where they came from, it might scare the shit out of them. And then I'm like, I don't know if I want to live in that existence with them. So yeah.
You're right. That is a very triggering kind of statement. It's, to me, this one too kind of goes back to like the founding of America, sort of, and like the whole electoral college concept, which I guess in younger years, when Rage Against the Machine was my political compass, the electoral college very much felt like, the fat cats, the rich keeping themselves richer. And obviously there's a huge element of that because there's no term limits and yada, yada, yada. But the overall premise of the electoral college and the overall premise of having, a council of the higher knowers, if you were in some sort of cult or religion, these kind of exist for multiple reasons. And I don't think it's just because the information is so powerful that, normal people, their head would explode, or they would learn how to shoot laser beams out of their eyes, and now they're like killing people at 7-Eleven and shit to like, I don't think it's so much of that. I think a lot of it is weeding out the people that don't really have what it takes or don't really care about it. There might not be a great of weeding out of people that have bad intent, because I think it's, in some cases, you just would be amazed to find someone that understands something intuitively, that they start to kind of like harness that knowledge and information. Like they might be the only one that can actually do it. Like Nikola Tesla, for example, in like the realm of like electricity, he eventually headed towards making like death rays and shit that he was going to sell to, other countries. Like he wasn't always a benevolent dude that just wanted everyone to have free energy forever. He also kind of had some other crazy projects that he was working on. So in those cases, he was sort of like this outsider that no one could prevent you. Manly Palmer Hall was very much the same thing, where he was an outsider that just intuitively understood this stuff, and he would come in contact with, groups, and they would just be like, oh shit, I've been doing this for 40 years. You already know more than me intuitively from it. You can't really stop people from doing that. But on the control aspect of it, and this is the triggering part, and where I kind of went 180 from Rage Against the Machine being my political compass, is there's a great analogy from either, and I swear this isn't describing my political ideology here, but either Dinesh Souza or maybe him quoting Thomas Sowell. It might have just been Dinesh, but he likened again this electoral college, and I say electoral college in the concept of like an elite or Illuminati or Freemasons. But imagine you're on a cruise ship and the captain dies, and do you want like everyone on the cruise ship, including the kitchen staff and the tourists and just every single person, to all decide who gets to be the next captain? Or do you want to just get like all of the crew that understands what a captain's role is and have them decide who's going to be the captain? So that was a great analogy on how would it apply in this small microcosm of a cruise ship that's isolated out in the middle of nowhere, where you actually have to make sure you pick the correct leader for the correct job. And if you just opened it up to the whole entire crew, or all the tourists, they might just go with the bartender that overpoured everybody, and now he's the captain, and now the whole ship kind of goes down. So you take that and you expand that out to society at large, and you can expand out to whoever controls religious knowledge. So I think there is some function to it. I don't think that means that human beings know how to dole out function in just ways. But there's like a reason that it exists, and I think there's a value to it. I'm not going to argue that that's like Skull and Bones is a benevolent thing because they decide who gets to become the leaders of the political and legal worlds going forward. But that power dynamic definitely exists, and there's a value in having that dynamic at play. But
do you think there's any powers in symbols, or is it just a language from one group to another?
Great question. That one, I think there is power in symbols, in that just over millennia and over generations and generations, I feel like certain symbols, are you familiar with form? I want to say it's called form theory or constant form theory.
No.
So like a lot of people, when they take psychedelics or they get inebriated, they'll share similar sort of patterns depending on like the drugs they're taking, and a lot of them I think are called form constants. And form constants are this set of like archetypal patterns that every person will tend to see. There's like double helix kind of patterns and spirals, and it's just ways that we try to perceive the inputs when we don't have all the information. Sometimes it's because of low light, or you're just a little bit out of it. Sometimes it's because psychedelics have taken over. But these form constants are things that we all see over and over. And I think that symbols and occult symbols, a lot of these are sort of derived from form constants, which are like biological patterns that just happen to people. And then in addition to that, there's probably the sort of a subliminal version of, I don't know how effective it is, but you go to sleep and you put on like history lessons and the ideas that you learn history while you're sleeping, whatever. Well, apply that to hundreds of thousands of years of astrological theater. So, I mean, if there's anything at all to subliminal messaging, then I have to believe, even in some unscientific way, that we've all been subliminally programmed just through patterns that you see in nature and patterns that you see in the stars, and just things that occur naturally that everyone may or may not be attracted or repulsed from, and those can be very easily codified into a corporate symbol or a little jingle, or anything that that can be commoditized and sort of standardized and commercialized. But I do think that there's power in those in those regards.
Do you think you could conjure entities? Do you think that there's like demonic spirits or good spirits, benevolent? Like, do you think there's what's your philosophy on? You said fallen angels earlier.
I want to really bad. I would love that if this if I believe there was more magic and like ghouls and ghosts and demons and angels and stuff. I want to believe all of that because it's so incredibly fascinating, but No, it's more of like I'm interested in watching those movies and reading those books and hearing other people's takes on it, but I can't imagine ever believing it personally, just because I spent so long wanting to and trying to justify every little thing, and trying to like force myself to see signs and things. And but a lot of that is just, you read about old philosophy specifically, so much of that magical thinking just has persisted forever. It's almost like that initial infantile belief of like, oh yeah, well, this makes so much sense. Of course, Rage Against the Machine to a 13-year-old is like the perfect arbiters of political theory, because everything is so cut and dry. Old and rich people are mean, and poor people are just victims, and when you put things into these little simple categories, then that's kind of the solutions you come from it. So I see that same sort of aspect of the angels and demons, but at the same time, I feel like there's so many people that are so incredibly passionate about it that they're like Alex Jones famously said he didn't used to believe in this, but once he saw how much the elite believed in it, then he kind of had to believe that it existed too, just because they believe it so much. I'm waiting to get to that point. I haven't hit that threshold yet, though. Like someone else's, fervent belief in something has still not been enough to make me believe in something. What about you? Because then you've kind of been posting some stuff about like chaos magic and some thelema sort of symbols. So I'm curious where your head's at.
I'm more of like, I do think it's kind of like the symbols represent like a divinity, like an order to me. Kind of like in a hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without. Like, I think we all kind of represent all aspects of these things. But I'm also at a place where I don't think darkness is evil. I think it's easier for evil to hide in darkness. So we just assume all darkness is evil. I'm kind of getting into this place where I feel like my head is my masculine, my logic, my protecting thing, that it's my filters that everything goes through. And my heart is my feminine. And my logic protects my feminine. I don't think I have two sides of my brain. I kind of am at a place now where I think everything's a psyop. Everything's a fucking lie. If you were allowed to print a book that was in existence, the longer your book's been in existence, the more in line with the manipulation and programming that whatever the powerful they wants to convince us of.
Yeah, I'd call it like distrust by default.
Yeah, it's almost like even the narrative, like on a small scale of maybe, like, I believe in the aether. Like, I believe that if all the books are burnt, some people are going to have the right intuition and the right meditations and the right prayers and the right Tesla of it all to fall into the right vibe and the right energy to just find answers and maybe find the right other minds that click just perfectly in a divine order type way where they would rewrite every book that was burnt. Like it would just be a new gospel. Or
I 100% believe you on that, but I also think that that would require almost an infinite timeline to consider, because like for example, how long do you think we'll wait for another Tesla to come around and to sort of be interested in that? Like what if Tesla was the same smart guy, but he was just like really into farming and for whatever reason just geeked out on farming and never really established any of the electrical principles.
Or even let's say he was there, or like you're saying, they say all the best minds now go into like finance instead of science because the money's better. like it's just they're all working on Wall Street instead of curing cancer. If you just like the 3D like CNN article. But the Tesla, let's say you really did come up with the cure for cancer. I don't believe the powers that be would let that out. I believe it's all buried and hidden, whether it's energy, that kind of currency, or your health, that kind of currency, or a good education, because I do think the smarter you are, not smart in the way of regurgitation, but smart in the way of really being able to pick apart your own ideas. And have a visual in my head of like that video game Pong, where it's just two panels bouncing an idea back and forth. That's how I want to break my own brain. I don't want my ego to rest in any thought where if that thing is disproved, it's whatever. I want more information to always kind of keep everything fluid. I think like flow and trust and really hone my intuition. But yeah, I'm kind of triggered by chaos. I'm kind of triggered by, I know it's shadow work I have to do in myself. I feel the anxiety it gives me when things kind of get this chaotic vibe. I can feel the way it changes my own vibration and like a woo-woo feeling of it. Like my internals start to vibrate if things feel like they're getting off some kind of rails. But yeah, I'm trying to definitely work with that energy instead of fucking oppose it all the time. Like I'm trying to find divine order with chaos, if that makes any fucking sense.
It also might just be a complete path to insanity.
Yeah, insanity or philosopher's stone. One of the other is going to happen. I'm either going to turn metal into precious metal, or society will Baker act me and be like, stop asking these questions. Just
I mean, honestly, to me, in a practical sense, the perfect middle ground is kind of like the person that you could be at your job and they would just be at the water cooler, and I would be looking at you thinking like, oh, look at this, this sheep that probably goes home and watches American Idol, and then you drop some crazy, interdimensional sort of shit on me. Like, I feel like that's the best kind of all around, where you can navigate the waters and sort of I wouldn't say be your own person. It's such a cliche thing, but like if you can actually blend into society, but also maintain like really crazy out there perspective without going fully blown, I'm going to disengage from society and move into the mountains or whatever. Because I think that both of those are extremes. Like if you can kind of sit in the middle of those, it's kind of like the perfect balance, essentially. Because if you, in my opinion, if you fully commit to chaos theory and you believe that chaos magic is 100%, reality, it doesn't feel like a sustainable thing that you could live the next 40 years of your life and fully believe in chaos magic and have some kind of a normal semblance, because there's no society on the planet that will cater to, someone that lives in chaos thinking 100% of the time. Like everyone at some point has to fill up their car with something, or they have to go into the grocery store. They have to go and do something that, that requires, kind of committing to that like superficial society that a lot of that magical thinking tries to kind of dismiss. So I also think that if magic is so real, let's consider that magical thinking and chaos is 100% real, then wouldn't the current state of society be a total proof of manifestation of what that chaos would be? So it's not like chaos exists outside of our shared experience. It would still be the exact same experience. It's just that it's fueled by chaos magic instead of fueled by whatever undetermined principle that is out there. So I don't know if that makes any sense. It's kind of like, to me, like whether chaos magic 100% does exist or doesn't, we have the exact same end result, right? And like in a very Machiavellian sort of way. So it's kind of a moot point. It's like it's two fishes arguing whether or not water exists. It's maybe if you're already inundated with it and you're never going to be out of water, then what's the difference? I like it if a tree falls, right?
No, I kind of am. A lot of the stuff, even if I'm looking up or posting it, and a lot of things, even on the Project Cheney IG that I'm going to set up, I really want it to be very organized and very per episode of what stuff we talk about, instead of just blanketly putting out whatever the fuck I feel like. Really, the funny part to me is of the shadow banning of all my social medias on the way up to using my personal account, which I never intended. And I am pretty shadow banned still. That I know you have to type in a lot of my name for me to come up anyway. But it's really just the questions of every single thing I get into, of every rabbit hole I start to go down. And then I find some different symbols. And I know you know, too, how you think the symbol you found and that you've been looking at for however long, you finally think you found the root of this thing or this idea.
Never.
And that is what's so crazy to me is so many people in my world, even in the conspiracy theory at all, or what group they hate or who they're holding to the fire, they don't know the root of their own religious beliefs, and they have a faith like the same way atheists don't want to hear it. Certain people that live on certain philosophies are living by a faith of that philosophy. And so sometimes I just, when I point out to somebody like that's Hellenistic or that's that seems like an Aleister Crowley like school of thought to me, and I see that it trigger them, but it's only because if any of the stuff I say is only because, hey, I worshiped at that church. Like I mock Hollywood so hard because I've killed more idols than any human probably on the planet has to kill. So people get really triggered if I point out that I'm like, oh, I think that guy's one of the bad guys. And they're like, no, are you kidding? DMX is like, he was a saint. And and I'm like, I don't know. I think if you make it to any level of them regurgitating you, you have to sell out somewhere. I've seen it in small scales and big scales. I just think it works. It's just
well, I would also argue though that selling out implies that everyone that enters any business, comes in like a complete virgin with, just the best intentions.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
that's it too. Like we act like the idea of fame in Hollywood. Like think of how many people you know in your life that are like, they would for $1 million or for American Idol or whatever.
$1,000, like $1 million.
That you're like the moral code of what people assume that happens. And I don't know, even the ritual of it all. Sometimes I believe there's power in ritual, and sometimes the power in ritual is the fact that we're all witnessing you do this fucking thing, and that's the power. We're witnessing you do this thing, and now we have it on you, like emotional and maybe physical blackmail. And
well, that's actually a really cool aspect of, I guess, magic and like spiritualism and all of that. If you lump it into one big thing, none of it means anything without two very common traits. One of those traits is intent. So you have to like actually have true intent in whatever you're doing. Whether you're talking about, being like a Wiccan that's trying to do some kind of nature incantation, or if you're, praying for forgiveness to some sort of Abrahamic God, like you actually have to believe what you're saying and have like the strong intent. And the other aspect of that is ritual, which really just boils down to consistency. So, I mean, but I would also argue to name one thing in the real world that you can manifest in the being without both of those, without intent, and without, it seems like it's, they're prerequisites to everything. So to almost pretend like there's some sort of monopoly only within like the spiritual realm or in this like cerebral metaphysical element, it's like, no, those are just the two ingredients that you need for anything in the world to work, whether you're making a bowl of cereal or plotting out how you're going to get your house in order, metaphorically. So
yeah, you have to have this action behind your manifest, your prayer, your I don't know, what the bleep do we know of it all? Like that's.
Have we talked about that one? Where do you stand on that one?
I'm kind of triggered. I believe that was single-handedly like sometimes I think there's chaos agents in the world, and maybe they have to be to facilitate the whole, you know, if you back up like the hurricane flow of it all, like the cycle. I think that that is the moment I can pick for most people in my life after seeing that God did not exist to them anymore, or it existed
Really?
to them in a whole different way. Like all of a sudden it wasn't
From What the Bleep, and I assume like The Secret, which
yeah,
was
the whole secret, the man, but I remember in college, like people that being a really big deal, those movies being like, oh, let's all like, oh, this is so deep. Like,
really, it's surprising and a little bit disappointing to me.
I
But
know. Well, it wasn't. It was like the first outside of God thinking that still seemed like a school of thought, but I think it was also like the first time science was becoming its own church.
yeah, well, they name drop like a Isaac Newton and a whole like as many scientific sounding people they can. They name drop throughout that whole series.
And then in my conspiracy world of the Nexium cult and looking into what's that guy's name? Mark Vincente. And he is like, it's like Keith Raniere, Mark Vincente in the Nexium cult and the whole breakdown. And Keith Raniere kind of has now looking at it from this far back, he has a vibe to me like he's Lee Harvey Oswald. Like he's the big fall guy from something a lot bigger. And like, look at everybody will think we cut this head off of the snake. But the guy who's making all the money off all the Nexium documentaries, who has all the footage, who's already made all the money and's already kind of led cults because Bleep became its whole own way of thinking and its whole own vibe.
So, was there a connection between Keith Raniere and What the Bleep?
Yeah, the guy who did What the Bleep Do We Know, Mark Vincente, is like the guy who did all. He's the second in the Nexium cult.
But from what I understand though, that What the Bleep was not a product of that guy being in Nexium. Rather,
No, it was way beforehand. But
he got successful, and then they're like, "Ooh, success! Let's get this guy involved."
I just think though, the way I just in my fucking weird brain of creating conspiracies. Oh, Mark Vincente is the real power guy. Keith Raniere is what happens when MK Ultra goes right. Like Keith Raniere is what happens if it doesn't go full Charles Manson, we end up with a Keith Raniere. You know, like he's just here. It's the same as every cult. Prodigy guy thinks somehow he's divinely touched. He has this vibe about him. But Mark Vincente was never going to be the fall guy for that same exact. It's almost like the What the Bleep Do We Know? If they became a church, it was Nexium.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's actually.
And then I think Mark Vincente doesn't become the Pope. Like it would be like thinking the Pope is the most powerful guy in Catholicism. Like,
or I mean, I
not that you think
I haven't thought about that in that context. That's actually really fascinating to me. But I would also say that there could be more of a dynamic here where Keith Raniere was the L. Ron Hubbard and Mark Vincente was like the guy that got paid $30 to write, the sci-fi fiction novel for, the little nerd magazine. And then L. Ron Hubbard comes along. He's like, oh, I know I can make a lot more than that guy made posting these in comic books. So that could have been the same dynamic here where Raniere was like, that's cute. You got a nice documentary that turned a profit, but like, I can get a harem over this. So,
and if you watch the way kind of Keith Raniere sold to Hollywood and to the elite and to the people, it's done the same way any good propaganda is done by a great filmmaker, and it's all done by Mark Vincente. He is the filmmaker for the Nexium cult. Like he's the one who he's like, let me follow you around with a camera. It was like the only person allowed to be around Keith Raniere all the time was Mark Vincente. It is really bizarre, their relationship. And so it's so bizarre.
So in your mind that he could have been the actual mastermind and his idea was to promote this out into the world and find someone charismatic like Keith to kind of be that figurehead?
I almost think that Mark Vincente, because of these documentaries, he can cleanse himself while making money of all of Mark Raniere while keeping all the good principles of what Nexium still stood for, what the Bleep Do We Know and Manifestation of the Secret still talks about. And he can create his next cult and see if it works this time. But I think Nexium, the same as Scientology, the same as a lot of these kind of cults that become famous. I think they're all kind of CIA, Jim Jonesy created things. So yeah, I look at all of them like this is created, this is manipulated, they want to. It's a way, like Jim Jones, I look at like what a perfect way to make everyone, this is how all communities are going to go. I just think the real religious, if we were going to start a cult, and the smartest way to do it is for one of us to be the mastermind and one of us to be the guru.
Yeah, I mean, I think they naturally all kind of turn into that. In some cases, the guru is just as manipulated as the cult members themselves, because the mastermind is kind of lining things up to work that way. And I'm sure as a guru, you're not like, hey, why are all these people loving me so much? I should really look into this. It's probably the last thing on your list of things to do of, everyone loves me.
No one, it's part of the problem that happened, I think, with 2020 is if you put a cape on somebody and call them a fucking hero, it is really hard for them to come home and tell you the truth behind that. I'm not a hero. There's no Joker. There's no Batcave. I'm just TikTok dancing in the hallway. It's like, it's really hard when you're worshiping them. It's a hard...
Well, it's literally the movie with Dustin Hoffman, I think, was called Hero, where he like gets falsely giving credit for like saving all these people from a burning plane, and really was like some other guy that didn't want to take credit. But like it's hard to turn all of that down. But yeah, there's almost zero incentive to tell people no, it wasn't me, unless it's like eating away at you for some reason.
And who's a cunt that's going to tell a nurse or a frontline worker, I mean my bag boy, that you're not a hero, you're just going to work? Who's that asshole?
Well, so the bag boy, I mean, they're not going to like spit in the bag right in front of you, but I don't even want to think about what a scorned nurse might be able to do to you, especially if you're still intake.
I know, it's just we've just set up.
Honestly, I would like to talk about teachers in that same context too.
Dude,
right?
Teachers were my third in my head. It's like, no, I don't know. Half and half with teachers. Half of me feels really fucking bad because I know so many great people that really could change the world and are awesome at kids and the language of kids and the energy of kids and keeping it calm and when they need to absorb things and doing all those. And they are so heartbroken because they get into a system, whatever state you're in or whatever kind of charter or religious or regular school system, and they get handed a book of check marks, and that is what they have to teach, regardless of what system you're in. A lot of the time, there might be like some Kashi type, earthy, crusty schools that are a little different. But then they have to stay away from a whole bunch of things that they're not allowed to talk about. And so they don't get to make it. I think when we were in school, yeah, they had things that kids had to learn in shitty school books that were still Rockefeller, school systems. But we had good people that also, I had some really cool teachers that told me about things that are so conspiratorial now. Like, with the whole Vietnam War, and would get all off the pages of the book and tell us real history. I don't think that's even allowed anymore.
Well, not only allowed, but God forbid that there was a kid recording you and then could take that. When we were kids, no one's going to come in with a big overhead, over shoulder VHS and like, go ahead, teacher, continue. With
you won't even see this.
Yeah, now it's crazy. The pen sticking out of your pocket could be recording the entire class, which I don't know. That's one of my favorite controversial topics is just talking about public education and teaching in general, just because it's one of those things where everyone's a hero and there couldn't possibly be a bad teacher and there couldn't possibly be bad system, but at the same time everyone like publicly acknowledges how shitty the entire system is, and everyone knows exactly what a bad teacher is because everyone's had at least one of them. I'm curious, what's your solution on the problem? How would you come in and fix it?
If I have a big, huge sweeping brush right now, my best solution would be if, I don't know how much money is spent on this garbage school system from tax dollars.
Let's say money was not even
an issue.
Yeah.
And, parents do, some parents, let's say even in a happy world where people like to go to their jobs, and sometimes, let's say in not a perfect world, like a mom didn't want to stay home with her kid, and so her kid, and she didn't want to homeschool her kid, which I also don't think every parent is a great homeschool person. Like my mom would have been shitty at teaching me subjects. I think I was smarter than her at 10, and she'd say that too. A solution for me would be, if I know some great teachers, and I think if they had like a classroom of 8, it wouldn't matter the age. And I think each person could actually contour the age to them. And they would get some kind of payment from the parent of said kid. And then they would decide per each kid, 8 would be manageable for an 8-hour day. You could have solo time. You could go over group stuff. They could all help each other, because maybe you'd have kids that were a little older. And I know teaching things sometimes makes you better at that thing. So teaching a younger kid how to do algebra might make you better at it. I think that old schoolhouse idea, the old like Little House on the Prairie, is actually the best idea, I think, in that community.
Well, it sounds like with a little capitalism mixed in there too,
yeah,
right?
I definitely think a teacher, people like they're providing you some kind of daycare service. Screw the education part. They're providing you a third of your fucking day that you get to go do what you want. You can lay at the beach, you can make a living, you can do something. So if they're watching your child, you should provide them an income for that. And then if they're educating your child, that should be an additional income. And then if you were actually involved in that classroom said part of the time, that would be great for the community, the other kids there, you'd know, parent, like it would all be good. To me, humans don't work in an idea of like 1,600 kids in a school, and you have to go around and meet 7 of your kids' teachers, and they're in there for 42 and a half minutes a day, and this is just this semester, and next semester they're going to have all different teacher. It's just ridiculous. And there's no ethics, and there's no civics, and there's no all these other classes that we had in school. But then we look at politics, and there is no civics and there's no ethics, and so it's just like, oh, of course they like.
How much did you remember learning in school that you would say was accurate and wasn't just something to guide you in a certain way of thinking? So I tend to assume that all humanities courses throughout school, they're probably the only value that you're given is being aware of the issues, but the actual ways that you're taught to think about them is invaluable.
Like, don't question it. I actually, grade wise, I was a good kid. I was quote unquote smart because I would regurgitate what I had to. But as far as behavioral wise, I got in trouble. I didn't get in mad trouble. I was just too talkative, always had to sit on the side of the room. I got sent to the deans and principals for really questioning my teachers. Like, just because you read it out of the book, it didn't sit right. You're the boss of this subject. Have more of an answer for me. Like, and so just where I'm like, I wasn't ready to move on sometimes. Like, if we have to know this for a test that I'm going to get graded on, tell me why so sometimes it would just go like that, and then they would be like, will you just get out of my classroom? Other people need to pass this test. I had to sit in the library a lot.
One of those, yeah. I had a couple classes where I just got permanently moved to the library. So instead of going to class, I would just do, personal study just to get me out of the teacher's hair.
I felt like my English teacher just pretty much gave me college thesis work to do. And I ended up with her a few years of English. She just happened to change each year, and I ended up with her. And she's one of my favorite teachers. But she just kind of was like, pick a thesis, figure out what a thesis is, write one. And then for the whole year, she just kind of critiqued it and adjusted it, and I never took any
that's
English.
funny. I think there's some of the best teachers that I had too, where they kind of recognize that, all right, this kid's not gonna follow the curriculum that's necessarily outlined, and they probably could have very easily failed me and kept me back, and time again. But I think that kind of like the teacher gives you a thesis where it's like, look, I know that what I'm doing is probably not going to mesh with what you're doing, but you can at least prove to me that you're not an idiot, and you can kind of like do Englishy things at the level that I expect them from you, just in an absolutely different environment than whenever, like when you were acting up, was it because you had an audience? Like if it were just you and the teacher, would you still have acted up, or was it because, you've got your
Audience,
peers
but
there?
also disciplinary problem kids, and taking away from what I needed or felt like I needed to learn. Um, I have no attention span. So if I can teach myself it quicker, finish this paper, like read what I need to in the book, finish my paper, stick it in my book, shut my book. Now everything else going on in the class, even what the teacher's saying is, I mean, it's all ridiculous. Like I think it's like,
Unless you consider the fact that a large portion of being in school is just learning how to just fucking sit there and be bored without distracting other people. Because it's almost like fast forward 10 years, if you're the banker at your little terminal at your desk, and you don't have anyone in line with you, but your colleagues do. It's almost like that's what you're being trained for. You weren't being trained to form an opinion on, of mice and men. You were being trained to figure out how to get to the end of the chapter and then shut the fuck up until it was time for everyone else to kind of share their input. Or, I mean, I'm not saying that exact
no,
class,
yeah.
but that's kind of the school experience.
It's funny to me, like one of the interesting symbolisms for the elite, as far as I was concerned, the Hollywood elite specifically, is at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, all of them regurgitated the brainwashing, because that's how they do it, is regurgitation. Follow the smart people. Follow the smart people. We got to wait and listen to the smart people. We got to see what the smart people say. And smart to me has become, well, first, if you actually smart yourself, you hurt yourself, in the word of it all. But smart to me is just regurgitating the information they want you the best. Intelligence to me is a whole different thing, but
Well,
we've
it's
all
funny
been
too
collectively brainwashed.
because celebrities saying listen to the smart people. It's like, well, who are we supposed to know who's smart? Because you, the one that's apparently not smart enough to give their opinion on COVID, but smart enough to tell us who is the smart person. It's a catch-22 essentially when you get into that.
And anyone, even in the most blue pilled way, I can't see that everybody didn't see kind of a coordination of like Hollywood with the NBA, with the certain politicians, with certain government agencies, where I'm like, this is really the New World Order that everybody's been talking about. Like, if you've been looking into stuff for so long, and all the signs are there of the New World Order, including signs of stuff that you told us in all the history classes you taught us about Nazi Germany. And not even the smart people recognize it. Like, even whether it's the smart regurgitated history that you want us to know, it's happening. And if you're next level looking into other things, not from it's happening. And so we're all just sitting here with our Rockefeller educated. Hello.
Hey,
How are you?
thanks for having me back.
Well, I know it's so perfect that at least you understood the weather, and then it made me feel less guilty, because it was almost like I got the weather right after you every time.
It was nasty. Usually the internet doesn't go out, and it was out for a couple or like an hour and a half or so. But in modern day, that's like at least like a week of normal.
You were so behind.
Yeah, I missed so much in those 2 hours that I'm still catching up.
That's where too, when you were like, oh, our internet can come back, then we got a bad storm here. Like, at first I thought you were behind me, but then I'm like, oh, I'm behind him. It must be coming that way.
Well, there was bands, so it was, who knows.
So I don't even remember what we were talking about at the end.
I'm not sure if I remember either. I had a little list of all kinds of random stuff that we could talk about, but I don't remember where we left on it.
I'm just gonna put lightning bolts, because I'm gonna just explain it at the beginning and then be like, and this is where we lost internet.
Yeah, just Florida stuff.
Internet here, yeah. So it's kind of perfect. So
well, I remember where we started at, and I remember we kind of meandered away from kind of like spirituality and like what is God into more like political sort of arena, and you were explaining some of your journey going through some of that. And I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned at one point you had like a born again kind of moment.
Yeah.
So was that literal? Like you literally went and got rebaptized and started reading the Bible again, or was it a born again moment, as in like your mentality changed?
I think it was more just like I got rebaptized and went through like the ritual of accepting Jesus Christ as my savior as an adult. And I don't even mean to chuckle. It was a real thing, but I think it was a desperate, looking back on it, it was right after my dad died. And I think it was just the last desperate cling of feeling something. Like I was almost just so numb that it was the dude, I remember the guy who saved me, in quotes. I really just felt like, oh, I needed a father figure hug. Like I was
It all just boiled down to like a daddy
like
issue.
Total daddy issue. So yeah, that's what I attribute it to now.
So did that fade away at some point, or did you just reframe it for yourself?
No, my logic totally just wouldn't allow it, and I didn't really feel anything. I didn't really buy into it, and
so when you say you didn't feel anything, I'm curious. Did you have like a metric set up to where you were like, okay, I started believing, or I was born again on this date, and it's been X months, and I haven't had some kind of epiphany or.
No, I even tried to tell people about it. Where I'm like, I think I'm born again. Like I'm Christian. Jesus Christ is my savior. I even tried to convince myself auditorily, but it was just all the same questions that persisted when I was 6 and 10 and 20. It's like they all still existed, where I'm like, so everybody else is bad. And, all those same little, real simple questions of like, so only these people go to heaven. And it used to be part of my stand-up where I'm like, so I hear heaven, like everybody's young and the streets are paved of gold. It kind of seems like Beverly Hills. Like that's like my anti. Like I don't want to be there at all. So, yeah, it's pretty. The psyop of things. I've definitely fallen prey, and that's why when I talk to people about things that I don't agree with now, or that it seems like I'm on the opposition stance, it's usually just because I stood on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Like I loved Bernie.
That's interesting.
I was just like, take the system down. Let's drain this Fed. Do it. Free college for everyone. Free health care for the world.
So did you love Trump and Bernie?
Trump, when he first came into the scene, I really just thought, this dude is totally a Clinton crony. Like, there is no way. I thought they were definitely going to run with him, the Republican side, but I thought they were
really right off the bat. You
right
thought
off
that they
the
were
bat. I'm like, oh, this is the only way Hillary wins, is they have to put her against lunacy.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just thought,
like he was controlled opposition originally.
Totally. So it was the only way I saw any different, because I saw what the media was doing, not talking about Bernie Sanders at all. I think they just put Bernie Sanders there as like one of the dudes, and they had no idea he'd ignite. Like they had no idea it'd catch fire, because all the same election fraud stuff with the Dominion machines, that all happened to Bernie. That's where I first realized how rigged the elections all were, where I started looking into counties.
When you say that no one had any idea, and how he kind of exploded and ignited on the scene, do you think that was wholly organic? Like that was entirely?
No, I don't believe in any grassroots anything anymore. I think everything's a Tiger King. I think everything is like, we are led to believe that we authentically make the trends, when really they decide what the trending hashtag is, and then we all follow suit with making the memes. So they show us a picture of Bernie sitting in his mittens, and then all that we come up with all the clever of it, and all the, where the internet always wins of it, or, we think, hey, you guys, I found this really crazy show. It's called The Tiger King. Yeah, you found it because they put it on the front page of your Netflix. You're not deeper than anyone else. You're not more well-researched. You're not like watching documentaries that matter to anyone. There's a direct narrative that they're selling to you with this. And I would argue it's probably symbolism of some sort of Tiger King in history that links to some
I like
kind
that
of
being the
Greek and
go-to
Roman
reference
gods.
here. I like Tiger King being the go-to.
I know. I think Chris D'Elia always said barracuda, like barracudas in life. You got to watch out for cudas because they'll turn to anything shiny. So whatever the media tells them is the next shiny thing, they'll turn to it. And I love that reference, but I never wanted to steal it from him. So I just call everything a Tiger King.
Well, it's probably better to let him keep that one at this point too.
I know, Chris D'Elia. I don't know.
That's it's so interesting because there's a couple quotes. I can't remember where this one came from. Probably came from some cheesy 80s movie, but they were mentioning how it was about like Einstein, and Einstein, it might have been the one where Meg Ryan's his daughter or his granddaughter or niece or something, and he's telling her like make sure you read the paper every day, and there gets some kind of conversation about like, well, the news doesn't have anything that's that important. And they were kind of taken back that Einstein would suggest someone, read the daily paper. And his point eventually was that, no, you really want to see what they're not writing in it. Like what things are going on in the world that are going on, but that for a fact just there's not an article in there. And that sometimes is even more important than the information that they're showing is the information that that they're not showing. And it's sort of that same antagonistic approach, I think maybe that you're referring to, where you see a top 40 artist and you're like, oh, wow, how much adrenochrome have they snorted or something along those lines where...
I don't believe in the top 40. Like, I don't believe that, like, there's a number one TV show because the most amount of people watch it. I think they tell you this show's number one and then everybody tunes in.
Do you think at this point right now, anyone could organically come to be like a superstar, whether it's acting, music, just like like the Justin Bieber sort of story where you get famous by uploading videos on YouTube and social media? Or do you think that would have to be manufactured now?
I kind of even think those algorithms on there, just because of friends I know and how I know they've been stifled and shadow banned and their numbers have been fucked with and they've had subscribers deleted off their account, where I trust them when they tell me this stuff's happened to them. I definitely believe in the opposite. They can push what person, even on YouTube, if they're telling you YouTube's the number one place to go and YouTube celebrity and YouTube famous, I think Jake and Ryan Paul are totally constructed people. They're just the same as Justin Bieber, because wasn't he just an internet celebrity that was found, a kid that could sing?
To be honest, his rise to fame came at a point when I had no interest in it at all.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that's how you get famous now. I do know that now, like the prerequisite to get into the music industry is a lot different than it was when maybe you and I were younger and had aspirations. Where the whole thing was you would get like a press kit and a demo together, and you might, if you threw a show and you could prove that you could bring money to promoters, then that might be somewhat helpful. But really, it was all about the press kit and the demo. Now it's like you don't even need a press kit or a demo. You barely even need a full song. If you've got 1 million YouTube followers, like hell, we'll turn you into a musician. We'll make you a star, kind of thing.
Like, is the Catch Me Outside girl organic? Like, Catch Me Outside, how about that? And now she's like...
I would make a strong argument that anything you've ever seen on a talk show is by default inorganic. I mean, when I was a younger kid, I remember one of my friends had gone to DC, or it might have been Chicago, and he was just on like a trip with his mom, and they were coming back the last day, waiting for the plane to depart, just kind of walk around the city. And it was a Jerry Springer show, so maybe that was Chicago, I think. I don't remember what city that was filmed in. And one of the executive producers just kind of like walked up to him in the park, unsolicited, was like, hey, do you two want to do a show at the Jerry Springer show? If so, we'll pay for you guys to stay here for a few extra days, stay up in this hotel. The plot, the whole, premise is that it's teenage runaways. So you're going to be the part of a runaway son, and you're going to be the mom, and we're going to be reuniting you guys for the first time and whatever. And I don't think they actually ended up doing it, but I just remember, that sounds obvious now, when you're older and you realize how kind of reality TV, like they found what the script was going to be and they went out and cast people for it, and they just get to pay bottom of the barrel if they pull you out of, the park and say, we'll pay you a ride home. It's like, oh, great. So
was there a talk show host called Jenny Jones?
There was one at one point.
Like not Sally Jesse Raphael. There was another blonde lady named Jenny Jones. I think her name was Jenny Jones.
Sounds familiar.
I had a friend.
I mean, it was huge, and that was like
everywhere. It was like Oprah, and then everybody after. I definitely had a friend that she had one of her ex-boyfriends call her and he said, hey, I don't remember if he was pushing an album or a dancer or an actor or what his gig was, but he's like, I can go on Jenny Jones. And she said, I just need to find, or their people said, I just need to find somebody who like won't date me because I was a nerd. Now I'm hot.
Yeah.
So she just had to go on and say that she wouldn't date him in high school.
Yeah, I mean it's a subset of people that want to be on TV. And once you're talking about that demographic alone, you're kind of pulling some weirdos out of the woodwork in ways, and people that are willing to kind of stretch the truth, and no one's going to call anyone else out on it because it's good ratings and they get paid for it, and you get a little bit of a clout for it. Another thing too that I was just thinking about is in the talk shows in like the 80s and 90s, that was almost like the festering ground for satanic panic. And remember, they would bring on like, if it wasn't Anton LaVey directly, I know that they brought on Michael Aquino on one of the shows at one point, like Donahue or something. Some of the people that got platforms in the 80s and 90s, especially considering pre-internet, right? Like in the internet age, and some rando person in like a fringe lunatic, cult somewhere, if they get a platform, it's like, oh yeah, well, it's internet days, everyone gets a platform. But if you think about the talk show circuit in the United States in the 80s or 90s, such a small niche subset that it's absolutely not a coincidence that all of these, sort of fringe players got like a platform for 40 minutes to an hour a lot of times. That's it's a little crazy. Like they didn't
Oprah, Donahue, I can remember all of Geraldo. They all definitely had Satan worship. Or, Howard Stern. I can remember everyone in the 80s and 90s really placating.
Howard Stern is less, because you would assume that he's doing it for the shock factor or bringing in. I mean, the show before him probably had someone, making a PB&J with like their ass cheeks or something.
See, that's where I think the more dangerous stuff is. I think the news, you're on guard when you're watching it. I think when you're open to entertainment, like the Joe Rogan, Howard Stern of it, that's when you're totally think you're being entertained and you think this guy's just, look at Howard's just giving you an honest opinion, but really he's giving you the biggest narrative. He's the one having Hillary on where you think he's humanizing her because you're assuming he's humanized. And because he's just, he's just talking off the top of his head. He's never cared. But I would say Howard Stern is the direct link of breakdown of the freedom that we used to have of radio, and his battle with the FCC and going over to Sirius would be the direct exact same thing mirrored to what Joe Rogan did on Spotify. It totally took the freedom off one It's just a way of tightening off the freedoms. And that's what I mean. Like
it's such a weird concept to me, because like Joe Rogan, we'll use him as an example, because Howard Stern, to me, it's like anything that Howard Stern said on the air, it would be like listening to the 3 out of 4 doctors recommend this toothpaste kind of thing. Like, if that's literally the only metric you have for believing something and letting it inform your decisions, is that Howard Stern liked some guy and developed a rapport on his radio show because they were promoting something. That's one angle of it, but I don't know. I think that the deal with Joe Rogan is, it's almost the same. Where like, who's listening to Joe Rogan and listening to what Joe Rogan is saying and taking that to heart, aside from just kind of like funny little stonehead banter? It's the guests on the show that are really bringing the information there, and I also feel like those guests could be going on any other show. And it's almost like Joe Rogan left YouTube essentially, right? And everyone's been saying, everyone get away from YouTube, find new things. Well, he went to Spotify, and it wasn't any better than what YouTube was necessarily doing. I mean, Spotify is now taking down episodes that you could have found on YouTube previously. So like, where's the freedom in that regard? But also, people listening to them, is everyone moving to Spotify? Are they sticking on YouTube? And if they are, why stick on YouTube? Why not go to like Rumble or any of the other ones? I mean, I know the answer to that. These are rhetorical questions. The answer is because there's shit content on those sites. The UI is, understandably 15 to 20 years behind what YouTube is, because YouTube got a head start and they've been doing it forever, and they can also afford to lose a shitload of money doing what they're doing. Not a lot of startups can just immediately start, spending money and hosting video for free, especially if they're going to be targeted by all the competition. Because you can damn sure bet, like, as soon as there's a viable competition, something bigger than Rumble, that can threaten YouTube. And once, Alphabet and Google, parent company, actually feels threatened, I mean, I don't think we've even seen that yet. Have they been threatened by someone that's encroached their territory so much that they've,
I don't think the laws exist for them to feel threatened anymore. All the monopoly laws that used to be there, especially for the internet, are definitely non in existence. Look at Facebook in its own and how many things, like if you looked at what Facebook...
Well, I guess they're bigger, right? They're bigger than any nation at this point.
Yeah,
so what do they care what a specific nation might, try to write against them or...
And they could move their company headquarters to any nation they want and pretty much dictate to that nation how they want the laws to be because of the amount.
So how do you win that battle? Because that one to me is very practical. It's a very like boots on ground, and it's also a slow moving thing that we're all seeing happen right now. Like clearly the trend right now between what the internet was 10 years ago and what it's going to be 10 years from now, we can see what the trajectory is, right? In terms of censorship and freedom and limiting just the exposure that non-accepted, thoughts get. Like every social media account I've had, I'm not allowed to promote anymore just because for whatever reason, if I made fun of an assassination or a vaccine or anything, it only takes, one report when it's so egregious that you made fun of, like the JFK assassination or something, or you're making fun of Iran-Contra. But I mean, like, there's no other real platforms out there. So I'm wondering, do we all just start going back to ham radio at some point, or setting up our own, off the grid internet, decentralized internet? Like, what's the long term goal here?
I think we kind of like radio. I think is important to go backwards because it still exists in everyone's cars. So I think to me, everything's probably a psyop at this point, but in the Art Bell way of just take over the AM waves again, remember like another thing when we were younger.
Well, even Art Bell was registered, right? Because otherwise he would have been violating FCC, and the FCC would have traced the signal and tracked him down. So even Art Bell had to toe a line at some point. He couldn't say anything.
Well, you can do your radio show how it used to work with you could do your radio show from one station and then sell it to channels that were allowed your content. So I think
Alex Jones model essentially.
Yeah, or even how they I think Howard Stern was actually the first broadcaster that was like, we're going to Philly, where it was a big deal to there's a name for that. I can't believe it's not on the tip of my tongue. I think Rush Limbaugh's the biggest guy to ever do it. Syndicate your show, put it into syndication. But when radio did that, it was like a really crazy deal that they were taking a show and it was no longer like.
Well, is this not similar to like the old radio shows like The Shadow, where they would film like a whole radio show and then kind of syndicate it out to different stations, and then those stations would sell it to their advertisers?
Yeah, kind of like that same idea, but I think it was just that it was like live morning radio going on, and they were like, who would care about live radio in like New York? Why would like somebody in Texas care about live radio in New York?
But we're describing sort of the institution of how you would approach, like if to do that modern day, right? We're talking about Clear Channel and Time Warner.
Yeah.
So
I love radio or what?
Yeah, but how do you skirt around any of that?
I know I don't know about signals or what level of radio signals, like you're saying, like ham radio. This is an interesting conversation that just came up last week. We were talking about ham radios, and I was like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, there was Radio Shacks everywhere. Everywhere. And I knew the type of computer nerds I knew, they could go into Radio Shack and like make something that you could take your landline and put it on, and weird stuff would happen with the computer, and then they would go in the back door of things. Like
phone freaking and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a whole different kind of computer nerdy than just software.
And to add a little old man rant onto the top of that too, another factor that's completely gone is that in Radio Shack in that same time period, you could walk in and be like, hey, I've got this walkie-talkie or this thing that's busted. And most of the time they could open it up and point out, oh, yep, there's your capacitor. It blew there. Here, you need a new transistor here. But if you were to try to go to a Radio Shack, even 10 years before they pretty much went bust, the only thing you're going to get from anyone working there is a phone plan, or they're going to try to sell you on some, VIP membership service. But you're not going to be able to converse with anyone, let alone ask them where like a certain resistor is. They probably wouldn't be able to tell you.
And think of that, like even the computers, like we kind of grew up in a time where people we knew were making stuff that's just commonplace now. Like they were putting together things that it just blew my mind sometimes, the things that people would create at a Radio Shack. But I think that, without us knowing it, is part of the shutdown of our freedoms. Because I wonder how much stuff that's in that Radio Shack, would it be almost difficult for you to find online? And if you did, you'd have to order it from another country.
Well, not just that, but a lot of the times the only supplier you can get for these, like let's talk about Apple phones, for example, right? They've got such a monopoly on that market that they've almost single-handedly completely turned that sort of dynamic around, where it used to be this hobbyist, do it yourself, fix your own thing. And now not just Apple, but almost every company on the planet now is trying to turn this around, where everything's proprietary, where you can't just use any old plug or any old transistor. The reason I bring up Apple is because I think they're the digitizers that sit on the actual face of the phone, that tell you where you're actually touching it, and it tells it, what icon you've tapped on and whatnot. It's not anything special. It's just a little piece of glass with like some kind of resistance in it. And you could have swapped it out for any other like part that you got from, Taiwan, China, Korea, whatever. But then at some point in the future, they updated their firmware so that it checks to see not just will this, digitizer work with this phone, but is it an Apple specific digitizer? So you could have had your phone fixed a year ago. You get a firmware update, and now all of a sudden your phone screen stops working just because it's like, I'm not going to let you use this, this third party sort of aspect to it, which is, it's the exact opposite of where the whole computer kind of craze started from. And even the roots of Apple, they would have been nothing if it weren't for mail order catalogs and hiring the people that knew how to put those together by themselves. And not just to pick on Apple specifically, it's almost everything.
It's every car now.
John Deere tractors, like farmers aren't allowed to modify their own tractor firmware, even if they know that they can fix it for cheaper and solve, legitimate issues. But no, you got to have some contractor come in and pay them, the specific rate. And that's the direction, I think. And yeah, Radio Shack going away was a whole component of that, but I don't feel like that was part of the grand conspiracy. It's one of those, like, we're entertaining ourselves to death sort of thing, right? Like, why do I need to figure out how to repair components and get these things from Radio Shack if I could just order a new one online from eBay or Amazon and have it in a few days? And you extrapolate that thinking out, and no more Radio Shacks.
I kind of put it in a way, though, like, you will never have your freedoms ripped from you. You will give them away willingly. It's always easier if you... It's always easier if you have, like, somebody do it for you, and it's quick and easy. It's the same way as, like, somebody's killing your meat for you now, and somebody's, mows your friggin' grass, and somebody takes the trash away from your house. It's almost like those little things of ease is how you lose.
Well, that's where it starts, because then all of a sudden the ability to repair things just slowly goes out of your grasp, and then by the time you might be interested in it again, you're like, oh wow, maybe I'm not so keen on paying $1,000 for a new phone every couple of years. It would be great if I could fix this myself. Well, now you've let enough time lapse that it's literally, it's either illegal for you to bring it into another shop and have them do it because it'll, make the phone stop working, violating your warranty or your terms of service, all the way down to actual, cease and desist if you're trying to show other people how to do it. I think the Louis Rossmann, who does iPad and iPhone repairs live online. I don't know if this is your bag at all, if you know who this guy is.
No.
So he's been leading this movement. I'm going to get the name wrong. It's called like the Right to Fix or something like that. And essentially they're going around and acting almost like lobbyists on behalf of just normal people in various, capitals and boards. And they're just trying to say that this anti-consumer idea of not allowing people to fix their own things. The tractor's one of the best examples, where a farmer bought the tractor from John Deere, knows he's got a problem with it, knows that he can fix it, but he's not allowed to own the special equipment that lets you flash it because it's a violation of warranty and yada yada. But being able to get that code, they're almost fighting it legally as if you've counterfeited something, and it's just taking a very strange turn. But Louis Rossmann has done a great job of kind of doing an FU, where for the last few years he just takes apart iPhones and MacBook Pros and iPads and shows you under a microscope, here's exactly what goes wrong, and Apple sucks because here's how they design it so that if moisture builds up, it's always going to go right here, and here it is, here's how to fix it, here's where to get the secondary products from. But I mean, they're fighting him against that, and other industries are seeing this, and they're kind of hoping that he loses. Well, there's a lot of people that are for this right to fix that's hoping that he's going to win it all.
It's so Monsanto. It's like, I have a farm.
Yeah.
Try to come sell me seeds. I'm like, I don't want your seeds. You buy the land next door, plant your seeds, or they cross hibernate. You know all my shit. You own all my shit.
And the Monsanto is a really appropriate analogy here too, because it's not like the engineers at Monsanto literally invented all of the technology they have. I mean, this is built on top of things that have been known and passed down and taught worldwide, and then once they find one tiny application of it, they patent the application, and now it's like they own a patent on all of the research that had gone into it that spans back generations. And it's the exact same thing with electronics. Like, Apple did not make every single component that's in their products from scratch, and there's a lot of aspects of that were borrowed, copied, stolen from places. So it's just so weird that you can almost put like a stamp on it, like, okay, I know that I'm building on top of the shoulders of giants here, but right about here, now I own everything that happens afterwards. It's a weird dynamic that I don't see corporations trying to get away from, but I don't think it's gonna last. It's not scalable.
Do you think that vaccines change your DNA?
I don't know. To be honest, I'm terrified of needles and medical shit. So like
like the Monsanto of it all. Do you think if vaccines changed your DNA, could they own you? Are you a genetically modified organism now? Like
the legal aspect. I mean, you could make a case, but I think in reality, I don't think so. It's somewhat. I would group that under the same theories as like, if you sell someone your social security number or look it up, and you can like sell it back to the government and get the taxes, or no, I don't believe so. In an academic setting where you're coming up with fun little theories, maybe, sure.
What about the capital versus all capital of the corporation of your name, like the sovereignty and lower?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. There was a theory that, and might not be as popular now, but it was like,
I know the one too about the social security, like you're worth like $3 million.
Right. I mean, a lot of that, I don't know what the original source, but I have a feeling Jordan Maxwell was behind a lot of sort of those theories that got put out there. I find them interesting, but I don't believe in that one, that you can, your social security number is actually some contract that you can like redeem, or someone's going to turn in or whatever. Who's going to pay it? Like, why would you be worth more than $0? It doesn't make any sense. But the DNA thing, I mean, I would be more concerned that they're going to find out that there's some kind of long-term effect and you can't do shit about it because you kind of signed a waiver, or it happened in this, whenever there's a crisis, like, never let a good crisis go to waste. So this is when people get to make really bold moves and blame it on the times, so that might be in the case of vaccines. It might be in the case of things that different politicians are doing to their local municipalities. It might be economic moves that are being made, but like this is the great time to do it, because it's there's no standard. No one has a frame of reference to the last time there was a worldwide lockdown. I mean, everyone that's been through one of those already is either dead or they're very old and have written memoirs or something about it by now.
And they've burned those and don't allow them in the library. Or if you, here's a weird thing. Speaking of, you can't find. I know you also have the Secret Teachings of All Ages. Is your copy from Los Angeles but printed out of China?
Well, I've got 3 or 4 copies. I'm sure one of them is in China. But the one that I've got is distributed by and printed from the Philosophical Research Society, or I think so, which is in California, yeah.
Yeah, look at it. And me too. The Jubilee edition, the best one, all the rated stuff. And I just think it's interesting to me that somewhere somebody dictated what wasn't allowed in this book from somewhere. And out of a lot of the stuff you look into when you're trying to look into, for me anyway, I find a lot of dead ends when I get Far East. As far as I see symbologies, I can find things, with Buddhism, but there's more to it than Buddhism in China. There's like a lot of unknown stuff, a lot of their buildings, a lot of worship places. I just find
I definitely have lived and grown up in a Western bubble, and it's very hard to break out of that. Not just because of language and cultural issues, but there's just it's a whole different mentality. I really do believe the whole East versus West mentality is completely different. Just how you approach understanding the world around you and everything. There's just no comparison to it. So it's extremely overwhelming to me. And you could almost make the same analogy to like Eastern Russia, where even Eastern Russia has such a unique sort of backstory and history compared to Asia and the Western world.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I always get the peacefulness of some of the people that were pushed out of Russia into the Kazakhstan mountains? Is that what that region's called all through there?
Caucasus
mountain range. But like all the stands, like the Kazakhstan and Dagestan, and those people are just really interesting, warrior spirited people.
Oh, and that's like the cradle where everything came from, west and east, depending on what research you believe the most out of. That or we all came from Africa and spawned out through go through Alaska, and then there was the original people, like the hill people. Do you ever get into those theories?
Hill people,
the mound builders.
Oh, like all in Americas?
Well, I mean, the theory though is that the same people that did those mounds, the mound builders, they were kind of like proto-Americans, like the original natives, but it was the same group that also went out and spread throughout Asia. So it was like it wasn't just a group that came to America. They kind of like branched out, and then I guess I can't remember all of the geological terms. I hated that subject in school, but the place where actual Alaska connected to Asia, once they crossed that. Strait. Yeah, there you go. So I mean, the mound builders to me is probably one of the more fascinating topics when you start talking about like cultural differences and conspiracies and religions, because it seems like that would have come from that same migration, and then as it kind of spreads out, it takes on a million different flavors and kind of becomes starts catering towards the local customs and the local flora and fauna and stuff like that.
I think everything's a lie. Like, I don't think they told us any of the truth at all. I don't believe that.
One of my big ones that I realized as a younger, when I started putting together that I had kind of a conspiracy theorist mindset, was that I realized I did not believe any rags to riches story. Like, anytime there was a rags to riches story of any kind, it was just immediate distrust, and to the point where
you're like whatever, Annie.
And just start looking up, how did this person get their money? Like, follow the money is pretty much where it always comes to, right? And you start following the money, and you're like, okay, well, great, they got really rich, but it was after a huge investment from, the Tavistock Institute or from, some other, and that's, I would find myself doing that constantly, even before I even had heard about, like Illuminati or Freemasons or anything. That was sort of this like go-to antagonistic mindset. Going back to kind of like your top 40 example, right? Like you hear a new song that comes out in the top 40, or they're getting popular airplay, and you immediately imagine, favors were paid or worse.
I don't believe in any Hollywood relationship. I think they're just promoting something.
You worked in actual radio stations before, right?
Yeah.
Did you come into direct contact with payola or see it happen directly?
I know for a fact that like my radio station was independent, and then like Clear Channel came in and bought all of our advertising. So they didn't own our channel. They just owned all of our advertising spots. And so with this amount of ownership, all of a sudden there was like little weird pools that happened. And this dates me a little bit, but I remember, and we played like punk music and rock and roll, like good music. And I remember one day the like kind of host of the show came in and handed us, I don't remember if he handed us a CD or told us like, hey, we have to play this at this time. And it was like, what? Because every morning we made our playlist. We like sat in a room and made our playlist, and we never got.
So in the back of my head, I would be thinking, or else what? You know? So like,
I know. So I was like, what? And he's like, oh, this is we're just gonna play this. And I remember that the song was that Mr. Brightside song. Like that coming out of my stage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want. It was like some song that came out and everyone the Killers.
I'm never gonna win at this particular.
Yeah, whatever.
Game. I always listen to.
It's totally one of those like when all the bands came out and it was like the Vines, the.
So when this was playing, did you feel immediately like there's no way this would have gotten any play unless someone had told me to play it?
I never heard the song before, and then within a month, I couldn't not hear the song. It was on every radio station. I'm sure it went to number one. I didn't even listen to top 40 music at the time in my life. I'm sure it went to number one. Everybody knew it. Like, I'm sure right now if I started singing that song, it's like, I'm Mr. Brightside. If I started singing that, my mom probably knows some of the lyrics. Like, and so it was my first thing of being in LA and thinking, because I always thought top 40 music wasn't really top 40 music. I never thought the number one TV show was the number one TV show, but it was almost like, aha. Like, I never attached that part of my brain to conspiracies. That's the weird part, is how much stuff my common sense was like, this shit's off. But I just thought, now I think really all conspiracies attached to the same Warren.
Oh, I mean, that's funny to me because the music industry is nothing but conspiracy. I mean, under the broad term, my favorite definition is that your mom and dad planning a surprise birthday party for you is technically a conspiracy. So, I mean, you can extrapolate that all the way up to the higher levels, but in that kind of a context, every single deal that's made in the music industry, I mean, I don't know if you worked directly with like A&Rs or anything. When you were sort of in that world, but
I was just low. I was just more like the fun person in the room. Like no one took me seriously. Like they were doing real stuff and talking real. Like nobody was taking me seriously back then.
Well, what was your role exactly? You're just like an announcer or disc jockey?
When I first started on the show, I did the news. It was brief, and then I was like not good at it. Honestly, I was reading stuff in other countries. It's so weird where I'm at right now and where I was then. And I was reading names of dictators or prime ministers or presidents or royals. I had no idea what I was even saying. It was like words were coming out of my mouth, and I had no attachment to the mental of it. Like I was in such a dumb party girl phase of my life.
And this was all pre-written for you, I assume?
No, I had to find my own stories, that part of it. It was like I was kind of Robin Quivers. For a brief time. Another lady came in after me who was probably 10 years older than me at the time. I was in my early 20s, and she was awesome, and I didn't even have any jealousy. I was like, oh, take this burden off me. So I was really just like interned at the show for a little while, and then I got like a thing where I only had to do pop, like party stuff, like what did I do this weekend and what celebrity news is going on. And then it was a totally different like fun time gig for a little while. I took a little break off the radio to go to my mom was having like a hysterectomy in Florida, and then all these hurricanes happened here. So when I went back, like it was a whole different life. I was like really just, I got to see what Mother Nature could do. And so every time I was in Los Angeles, I had post-traumatic stress of an earthquake I was never in, because I just thought like, what would this town do if it was just in the natural disaster I just was involved in? Like, how would this town fare without power for 14 days?
That's not a very fun mental game to play because I don't know many towns. I mean, I guess that's because I jump around from major cities, but it's a terrifying scenario. Is that food's been out, water's been out, electricity's been out for 2 weeks, and now is when people are starting to knock on doors and check to see if you're home, and if you're not, start looking for supplies. Right, rightfully so almost, but it's kind of scary because well, it was like the original real world. Like everyone stops being polite and starts getting real, but this would be like the real world,
And have you lived in Florida through hurricanes where you've lost
Oh
power
yeah,
for enough?
oh yeah, big
And
time.
aren't you kind of impressed with humanity in Florida during that time? It
Yeah,
always
so
really lifts me up.
well, it depends on the neighborhood and kind of where you're at, but yeah. So like some of the good examples for people that aren't familiar with the way that it happens is that power go out, and there's always these groups of people. There's the ones that are kind of like fresh to Florida that haven't lived here or haven't been through a hurricane yet, and they kind of are freaking out, not sure, and they'll go out and buy, like $1,000 worth of supplies. And then you've kind of got like the people that have been through it enough times that they don't really freak out. It's more of like every year, right? It's like, oh, it's around that time that we should probably start stocking up on non-perishable goods and buying some distilled water and things like that, and
Make sure you
supplies.
don't have old gas in your generator.
Yeah,
Make sure
yeah,
you change your
yeah. Put
filters.
stabilizer and everything, and yep. But I mean, it's funny because people that aren't used to doing that on like a yearly basis, you get completely caught off guard, and there's so much set up to have you fail if it weren't for your kind of local community. So, for example, power goes out, or the water becomes non-potable. A lot of the times, neighbors that have bought all those extra goods, they'll just go door to door and be offering free food and free water, or things like that. I don't know. It's weird because like the week before, you might have been driving and seeing the same people, and yelling at them because they're driving like assholes and getting in your way when you're trying to go to Publix or whatever. But as soon as like one of those big things happens, everyone calms down and are kind of like treating each other a lot nicer, like humans. And I actually want to point out something that this is very pseudoscientific, but it's something that I just kind of feel is true. But like when the power goes out and everyone loses electricity, like we don't have these Wi-Fi signals blasting nonstop, and you don't have the 60 hertz TV, signals, and all of just kind of like the ambient electronic noise that's constantly inundating us. As soon as the power goes out, and like the entire street is out, there's almost this like overwhelming sense of calm and peace and silence that when the power goes on. And I'm not just talking about like the AC spinning or like fans on. Is there's something like deeper to just not having any power anywhere flowing. I feel like there's like a real physical effect, but that might also just because I'm a city bumpkin. I'm not used to like going out on long drives of the country where you're completely away from power
No, and
lines.
you're totally right. There is this like, it's one thing when your house just loses power, there's a sense of panic. Or when you're just your street and you look at all the other streets around you and they have power, you're pissed. You're like, my Wi-Fi. But when once your power goes out in a hurricane, it was just a wave that hit everyone you know. It's just like a weird thing that happens, and it's by like everyone in your town, even when you're looking at like FPL power maps, it will be 100% of the power. Like I think when that storm hit us from the Key West up,
Yeah.
it knocked out like 80% of the power in our state. But I think I never seen anything prepared like it. It's like because of the amount of tragedy that happens here, I've seen people that lose their power like everybody has a generator. I've seen people, like you're saying, drag plugs over to other people's houses just to be like, why don't you turn the AC on for your kids and come outside and have a beer? Like just really kind gestures because they realize. Or dudes drag out their full meat freezers with their huge grills into the middle of the road.
That's another really good example of everyone's food's going to go bad, and they'll just be huge, barbecues and kind of like block parties. But it's less of a celebration and more of like, hey, we might as well all eat this food or it's going to go bad.
There isn't a grandma that goes with her windows not boarded up. Like all of a sudden, dudes you never seen in the neighborhood before are boarding up granny's windows. Like some lady that's lived alone that everyone thought like that's a creepy witch that lives there. No one talks to her. They see 10 cats in her yard, but they're boarding up her windows during a hurricane. And so it's like that kind of shit is what other states, everybody talks about tragedy all the time. Everybody talks about racism all the time. Everybody talks about natural disasters all the time. But I feel like Florida actually lives through all that shit on a regular basis. There isn't a state that's more racially diverse than us. There isn't a state that has more cultural differences than us. I think we're pretty, even the far Republican, far Democrat, I think it's represented in our state more than anywhere else. If you were to boil the
there's that interesting dynamic of North Florida is like South Georgia, and then as soon as you cross Central Florida, the more you go south, the more you're actually going north in terms of demographic. Like, the closer you get to Miami, the closer you're getting to New York City almost.
Like, we have the biggest country people here and the biggest city people here. We have artists here and we have, like, cowboys. Like, I think it's everything in between, like, where you legitimately can go to work at your job and work next to somebody who loves country music and somebody who only loves hip-hop, and they both know each other's songs. Like, it is a different vibe. And the Cuban girl will come in your work and they'll know her songs too. The Mexican girl will come in and they'll be like, oh, Selena, I heard her yesterday. It reminded me of you, girl. Like, it is a weird vibe here that I think everybody talks a big game in other places, but people live the game here. And I think that's part of the reason that Florida held its spot in the world. Like, when we were growing up, it used to be the coolest fucking thing in the world. To me, it was like one of the American pride things is that we were the melting pot. We were like all the cultures in one, and we used all the cultures. And growing up in it, it was like freely accessible to all of us. Somewhere in the last like 10 years, it became like, that's cultural appropriation, where I was like,
I don't know how much I believe that, because I almost feel I get the top 40 vibe from that, the whole melting pot. I mean, I think it's de facto a truth that this country is a melting pot, but looking upon it as like as if it was always like a pride and joy, it almost seems like it was a dirty secret for a long time, and then there was like this threshold when it was like, oh, let's start celebrating diversity, but not even 30 or 40 years before then, unless you were anything other than a WASP, you didn't really get to enjoy in those sort of those things, even, I mean, talking about like even down to like Irish and Italian immigrants,
oh, yeah.
Let alone if you were like a racial minority, if you were Asian or if you were black or anything.
I know. I just felt like there was some part of like, even right now, all my friends, they all, regardless of their color or race, they all, have a little more spice or vibe because of growing up during the time we grew up, where we got all these other vibes around us than like my mom and her friends. Like, my mom and her friends all looked like each other. They all went to the exact same church. They all lived on the same street. They all went to the same schools. Me and all my friends don't look like each other. We look like the real world.
That's a good example.
I know, but then like you're saying it because everything is a psyop, and even the real world, maybe it was all design. Like,
so here's another common pattern though between you and all of your friends. Did your parents and all of their parents also come from Florida, or they came from other places and moved to Florida?
Everywhere. All my friends, I actually, all my friends here.
Because it tends to be pretty rare to find a native Floridian that was like born and raised in Florida.
I'm born and raised in Florida, left at but my across the street like friends, they are my besties from Portland, Oregon, and one of them is from Georgia originally, and the other one's from California originally. My next door besties, one of them is my oldest friend, that she's from New York originally, but I met her in high school and I only really knew her 1 year in person in high school, and then we became like phone friends.
I was gonna say that everyone in Florida has to have at least one friend from New York. It's like a prerequisite.
Oh yeah, you have to. I almost feel like Floridians probably get no credit, and I've traveled a lot of places in this country. second best pizza after New York. And Chicago deep dish is a totally different pizza. It is not, it's delicious. It's amazing. I just don't even put it in the same.
It's quiche. It's like a quiche.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome, but it's not the same as like
I mean, I definitely can't agree with you on the Florida versus New York, just because unless they've got water that they're shipping in from New York and making the pizza in Florida.
No, I think New York's number one, Florida's number two in the country. After
right, okay. Well, I mean, but
because we're New York.
So many New York's, plants, yeah.
I just learned how to make pizza from all these New Yorkers. I felt like I had a little New York pride for a little while. I never even was from there. I know it is. It's like that Florida thing. But I also tell people when they move here, it's not us that drive bad. It's during half the year when all the New Englanders are here. That's what makes it look so bad.
Yeah, honestly, traffic is a fun topic to talk. It might not be the most interesting topic for everyone, but I've always kind of seen driving as there's two kind of main types of drivers. There's drivers that are trying to get somewhere, and people that are driving that don't necessarily want to get where they're going, or they don't care if they get there on time or whatever. And there's like really no middle ground between those, and there almost needs to be like two different highways for these two different people. But so a slight tangent on that same topic. Do you find yourself getting road rage in Florida?
I don't, because I'm one of those people. My OCD.
Because I-4, for example, is crazy dangerous just from the road rage factor.
I leave everywhere I need. I will take an hour of time to get somewhere that's 10 miles away because I don't want to be late anywhere. And I just assume I'm going to catch every light, catch every train, catch every old lady, catch everything. And so I just want to take my sweet ass time. I actually have a snail on the back of my car. So if people are like, what's this fucking shit going on? They're like, oh, it's a snail bumper sticker. I should go around. So yeah, I don't really get road rage, but I hate driving. I get really I don't like it. I am like, I can't believe I'm doing this forced choreographed dance with a bunch of strangers with life defying, like we might as well all have guns in our hand or swords, and we're all like, let's have a choreographed sword dance.
Yeah, and mix into that not everyone sees it as they're, fighting with swords, and they've not everyone driving on the Florida roads realizes that every crazy turn they're making could literally end their life, or you're not going to walk anymore because you had to cut this car off.
And that's the other thing from living every place that I've lived. I've lived in Los Angeles and lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I've been in enough cities for months at a time to really gather and drive in those places. I tell all my friends that move here, this isn't like your state. This isn't stop sign to stop sign. We're not going 25. You will pull out just a corner, and now it's 55 miles an hour. And then you'll just be driving 70 miles an hour, and now it's 35. There's no rhyme or reason sometimes. It's just, or to get there, you have...
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about some spots in Alligator Alley, and the reason why it goes from 70 to 35 in those places is because I have a feeling that those tickets fund those entire little towns, everything. You just paid for their library to stay open for another month every time they pull someone over, right after it jumps from that 75 to 35.
That's such those small town conspiracies. That's where I actually think most of the dirt lies. Why we're all paying attention to presidents and the famous people up here. It's the small town judges and sheriffs and mosquito control commissions and people that go unopposed, and you're you could look up the seats in your area and you're like, holy shit, this guy's been serving forever and no one's ever opposed who he is.
Have you heard of the Ocoee massacre?
No.
So let me I don't want to misquote some of this, but I found out about it recently and it completely blew my mind. Speaking about all the dirt is in small towns in Florida. So, okay. So the Ocoee massacre was essentially, I'm just gonna broad brush some of this, but it was about African Americans not being able to vote in local elections, and to the point where they were intimidated, and their entire, a whole section of town was burnt down, and a lot of them were killed in the process. And this happened in 1920. and there was about 35 people killed, and this was in Orange County, right outside of Orlando. But it's notable because this is technically the most number of people killed in one place over a political, act, and it was just last year, 100 years ago. But I mean, it was like a huge event on national scale, and it was the most recent one, I guess, to have happened at that scale as well. But it's something that I had never even heard of, and it was literally in a town, of like maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from where I'm at, and it was just because I was talking to one of my friends that does like a bunch of the old historic tours, and they kind of mentioned this, and I didn't believe them. I thought it was someone was dredging up an old story and trying to give it extra clout because that's kind of the flavor of the day. But no, sure enough, like this is a legit crazy event that happened in recent in history here. And I think that story, I'm not going to go into the whole story, some awesome documentaries online, but it kind of describes that small town mentality where like it was an entire town against another entire town. It was like, oh, we heard that town over there is going to vote for the guy that we don't want them to vote for, so let's just go and kill him. And that was pretty much how it operated. And a lot of that just kind of faded away. It's not like we had this huge revolution where lawmakers came and they chased all of those assholes out of town. It was just times changed a little bit, and those people kind of faded into the background, but they're still there. The sort of the dynasties are still in place that had set that up. And I would argue that the mentality that got a lot of those families into those places, that mentality probably still persists on kind of the down low,
Like the forever Hatfield and McCoys.
Yeah.
Yeah, Florida has, it's like, it wasn't Rosewood here too? The Rosewood Massacre in Florida. Speaking of black people, I think that's one of, I don't want to misquote that, but I never tippy tap and look stuff up. I believe that was where like, I don't want to mix it with like a whole bunch of crazy movies that I seen. But I think that's a rabbit hole. I'm going to have to look it up now. And
Florida's got some crazy, history, especially if you go pre-colonial days to where like Ponce de Leon came and all of the cool conspiracies about, like what they actually found and not just the Fountain of Youth, but the trades that were made, the sort of technology that got brought back, how early they came. I mean, Florida is one of the most interesting states to kind of approach and look at that way. And I was going to mention too, we started this out on the whole natural disaster, bringing people together. So another unique thing that I'm not sure happens in a lot of our states, but the second a natural disaster is kind of announced for Florida, you've got some hurricanes coming through. People from like literally every state in the continental U.S. all start packing their vans full of plumbing and roofing supplies and electrician supplies, and they all like make a big migration. It's like like a yearly trip to Mecca for a lot of contractors.
Yeah, totally. Will you come back on the show and we'll just do like a Florida weird digs of, because like Casey Anthony, the Finders, all this stuff like you're talking about with the Ponce de Leon, the Seminoles here, Broward County. I feel like we. So
if you're Florida native, right? Did you ever go to the Seminole County Fair and do like the I can't remember his name, or like a Lake Okeechobee? They would always have like an annual kind of like gathering there.
No, I haven't been there.
Never once? Oh, I mean, it's long gone now. It's totally different.
I was a South Florida. I was a Palm Beach, so I did all the weird rituals down there. Like I swear the world's biggest Christmas tree was down there every year. And I keep asking other Floridians, like, do you guys remember the world's biggest Christmas tree? Like it was enormous. Like they cut it out of a forest and then they put it back together with screws and nails in the middle of like somewhere Palm Beach or South. And it was a whole
bigger than Times Square.
Yes, and it was a whole Gnome Fest ritual. It was enormous. Even in my little, I mean, of course I was a child, but I felt like, I mean, I'm sure I could find stuff on that too.
I've never heard that before. There's a town by me called Christmas, Florida, which is an interesting place to drive through.
There's the psychic town in Florida.
Oh yeah, where's the one where Gibson Town, where a lot of the carnival performers went and retired too. And aside from that, just kind of being an interesting topic, but apparently like the guy that ran that town has had like all kinds of dirt on him and interesting conspiracy angles that you can go, like, Carney Conspiracies kind of has like its whole little dark side to it.
Disney, NASA, the Windsors, they have there's a lot going on in Florida. Yeah, I definitely would love to have you come back sometime and we'll just totally break down Florida.
That would be an awesome one, yeah. An official report from Florida man and Florida woman.
Perfect. Do you have anything that you want to plug before you leave? And I'm so grateful to you that you came back through all the thunder and lightning and Zeus play.
Nothing to plug specifically. Go to paranoidamerican.com and read a bunch of free comics, and that's pretty much it.
I have loved hanging out with you, and thank you.
Yeah, let's do it again soon.
All right. Thank you.
See you, Cheney. Bye.
So she has been Cheney, and now she's off to smoke a blunt. See you next Tuesday, you fucking cunts.
Right, or if it's like everyone's sense of rebellion comes from the best, platinum selling albums from when they were kids, or from Hollywood movies that have, V for Vendetta and Matrix. Like if these are your only points of reference on how to rebel from the system, it's kind of totally lost cause,
Yeah, you're playing the instrument they handed you to play. Like you're just,
good way of putting it.